Hello and welcome to episode 59 of Adult Music. Your co-host Russ on this side, and over there is Mike. How you doing, Mike?
Hi, it's me, Mike the classical guy.
Mike the classical guy.
Yeah.
And I guess that makes me the jazz guy.
Yeah, I guess. But we listen to everything, really.
Yeah.
I'm keeping up on all the rock music that's come out this year, although there seems to be less and less of that.
Yeah, there's not a lot of rock going on.
As popular music is kind of in forms that I don't know how to classify it. I don't know. If I were in college today, well, I guess I'd be listening to it, but I don't know. When I was in college, music really informed us a lot.
Yeah.
And it involved guitars, I guess. A different age. Different age. I don't know.
That's right. Well, we're here with this podcast. Well, it'll be 60 next week. Wow. The episodes are zooming by.
Oh, wow.
Bringing you music for the mature mind. That's mainly classical and jazz music.
Yeah, it's really been all classical and jazz, isn't it? I mean, we intend to do more. The idea is that the podcast is going to grow. Maybe we'll get some co-hosts. Maybe we'll try some, different kinds of music from around the world. But I don't know. We're still where we are.
Yeah, there's so much. I can barely...
There's too much to do here. Yeah.
Get through looking at all the new releases. I've been spending almost an hour a day some days just sifting through all the new releases that come out. That's sort of the blessing and the curse of streaming. There's so much that comes out that you can check out right away. So,
one of the interesting things about classical music, I remember in 2021, I got so many albums. I think I bought more CDs that year than I ever have in my life. And now this year suddenly, there's plenty coming out, but I'm not seeing a lot that I really want to hear. And I think there's enough for the show though. But I think it might be because the pandemic is finally catching up with us, because people they either didn't record or they did this kind of solo project in their house. There's a lot of solo violin recordings and piano recordings and that sort of thing. But I don't know. I think we're seeing the result of it now.
One thing that I think we've done a good job of is with variety. And that's been the kind of fun thing for me in jazz anyway, is trying to get a variety of styles and a variety of locations, making it as international as possible.
Yeah, it's been a real ear opener for me, because I wouldn't have heard all this jazz otherwise, And
I think in classical, you've done a pretty good job as far as time era goes. We've gone way back to Renaissance and up to current day, and we've gotten some interesting instruments. We've got some interesting stuff tonight, instrument-wise.
You know what my big dirty secret is, though? If we weren't doing this podcast, I'd still be listening to all this music anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
So there it is.
Right. Well,
in fact, this podcast is cutting into my music listening time.
That's right. We're coming to you tonight.
So you should be grateful, listener.
On Easter Sunday evening.
Yeah, here we are, Easter Sunday. Happy Easter, everybody.
To everyone around the world. You'll be listening to this probably after Easter, but that puts a little time stamp on this one. And as I said, it's episode 59. Before we get going into the music we'll discuss, I want to remind our listeners and any new listeners we have that in the episode description you can find links to all this music, except we have one Hyperion this evening, don't we?
Yeah, we do. There are going to be more coming too. There's some good stuff in Hyperion coming out. We do have a Hyperion this evening.
Yeah, it's not available on streaming, but I'll give you the links to their website. You can check out samples anyway.
And I want to mention they're a great record label, except that they don't put stuff up on streaming. They have so much great stuff on it.
Yeah. Maybe they'll come around. Sony's kind of come around with a lot of releases recently.
Yeah.
They're on streaming.
But they're like a major label.
Yeah.
So, Hyperion's still kind of I guess you'd call it a boutique label.
Boutique.
Yeah, they're smaller.
For anything that's available on streaming, I'll put the links up for Spotify and Apple there under each recording information. And you also find the full episode playlist with all of the music in one spot on Deezer, where you can listen in CD quality. And also follow the podcast there if you like. It's our preferred streaming platform. And you can find us at Adult Music Podcast. That's our username. Now, if you don't see the full description or list on whatever app or platform you listen to us on, you can always come over to our host site on Podbean, Podbean, podbean.com, and all the links for all of our past episodes are easy to follow there. Now, if you enjoy the podcast, please follow or subscribe on whatever app or platform you're listening to us on. If you take just a moment, give us a ranking or write a review. That helps us get listed in the browsing category recommendations, which we have been for this last week.
Yes.
We've been in Apple and Podbean.
And it helps because we got a few more downloads this week than we normally do. Yeah.
Get some new listeners, and that makes us happy. And growing our audience is one of the things we'd like to do. You can also find us on Facebook. Just search for Adult Music Podcast. We've got a page going there. You can leave a message, put a comment there. You'll also be able to access the playlists there.
Yeah, please do that. We do want to hear from you.
Yeah. And if you'd like to contact us directly by email with any comments and questions, you can do that as well. Our email address is adultmusicpodcast, that's all one word, at gmail.com.
Okay. So you just mentioned it was Easter, and I just want to mention, we're not going to do a review of this record, but I heard this week, I spent Easter week listening to a Bach St. John Passion by the Monteverdi Choir, English Baroque soloist, conducted by John Elliott Gardner. It's a new recording on Deutsche Grammophon, and I have the physical copy, which comes with 2 CDs and Blu-ray audio. I can't tell you how exciting this was.
Wow.
Now, the Blu-ray audio streamed at 96 kilohertz, so it's sort of like a super audio CD.
Yeah.
And it was in surround, and it just sounded beautiful. It was great to hear all these voices in that format, and it has a video on it too of the performance. How nice was that? Really well done. John Elliott's looking pretty good for his age, I have to say. He's pretty active recorder. So that was that's a nice recording. I would give that a listen. And the other one I mentioned last week I have here on the shelf, and I didn't get to it, which is sad. This might have to wait till next year. Matthew Passion by Bach. This is by Pygmalion, conducted by Raphael Pichon. Some of the vocalists are Julien Pregardien, Stéphane Degout, and Sabine Devier. This is it looks like it's almost all French singers. There's a lot of them. Anyway, highly recommended. It's this one if you want to listen to it. All right, but I actually haven't heard it yet. So,
all right.
The St. Matthew Passion is a bit of a project. It's over 3 hours. long.
Yeah. I have a couple recordings of that, but like you say, you need kind of a whole afternoon to get through it.
Yeah, and it's kind of, I don't want to say it's samey, but it's good. But it's one of the great works of Western music, really. It's kind of, so by the great Johann Sebastian Bach. Anyway, we're not talking about that tonight. We're gonna go. We do have some religious music coming up at the end. Some contemporary composers, religious choral music. It's not really Easter themed.
No,
there isn't really much Easter themed music, which is a funny thing because people would think that Christmas is the most important, Christian holiday of the year, but it's actually Easter. Easter is really where the whole Christian thing starts.
Right?
Yeah, the meaning comes in. But I guess Christmas is at the end of the year. It's near New Year's. Everybody and people give presents. There are a lot of traditions around it. There are a lot of traditions around Easter too, but I think they're only adhered to among Christians themselves.
Yeah. Maybe it's an idea. Someone should start writing Easter songs.
So, Jewish people have Passover, and, Muslims have Ramadan at this time of year. So I think we're all in our own little corners. I don't know.
Well, where are we going to start out the classical world tonight?
Yeah. Okay. So the first one, my general template is like Baroque, and then something in between, and then something contemporary, and then I kind of veer from that. But I'm back to Baroque tonight, which is nice, and a familiar musician for this podcast, Théotime Langlois de Zwart. We really like him a lot. And here he's recording with Les Ombres, conducted by or directed by Margot Blanchard and Sylvain Sartre. This album is Vivaldi, Leclair, and Locatelli violin concertos, and it's on the Harmonia Mundi label. Now we've talked about I think Langlois de Zwart on this. This is the 4th time he's on.
Wow.
Because he just keeps coming up with these intriguing projects, and we really like him. I've liked three of the 4 recordings that he's played on. I still do listen to the Proust one, say, maybe this time I'll like it. But I don't know. It's kind of. I think it's kind of a. He's good on it, but I just feel like they don't. The two players didn't really match very well.
Yeah, gel together as well.
Yeah, I don't know. They kind of. I don't want to get back replay that. You can listen to the old episode where we talked about it. My comments still hold because I do change my opinion about.
Sometimes
things we talked because you need time to listen to some of them,
Sure.
But I don't know.
Well, what he has is that amazing sweet sound, and
he's got a sweet sound
that can make almost any piece sound just great. Even if it's not an outstanding composition.
He plays rather quietly, sort of like we talked about Alina Ibragimova, but it's a totally different sound than she has. Yeah. It's really nothing like that. Also, he has this amazing melodic sense, like he just pulls all the chocolatey goodness out of the melody, in these winding Baroque melodies. Sometimes I remember playing the piano, you would never really know where to stop one line and start the next, because it just sounds like it should just keep playing forever. But you want to put in some breaths, even though the piano, you don't need to breathe on the piano, but you want to make it sound human. So
he has got excellent phrasing that it finds the arc of the melody and makes it really sing. So I always enjoy listening to him play, which is a lot for me to say because I'm not a huge solo violin work listener, but everything we've done about his recordings, and he's recording a lot these days. Really
he seems to be
nice.
coming out with 3 recordings a year so far.
Wow.
With him as the lead. It's not like he's playing on somebody else's album. He's he's kind of the lead. Anyway, this particular program, I actually didn't read the booklet note for this one. I really should have because I wanted to know, what his kind of idea was for putting this program together, but I just didn't get to it. I don't know. Anyway, it's Vivaldi, Leclair, and Locatelli, and this particular one starts with. Let's just go through these works, and I'll mention the things I really liked about this album because I liked this album a lot. This one, I was listening to it all week long, actually. Okay, it starts out with a Vivaldi. It's not really a Vivaldi piece. It's called Prelude in A minor, and it's based on Vivaldi's Violin Concerto. RV 355. This is I think he may have improvised this. It starts with these rumblings from the ensemble, and especially the harpsichord, and the violin plays quick figures. And if you've ever heard Arvo Pärt's contemporary piece Fratre from 1977, it kind of the opening violin figuration sounds like that. It almost sounds like he lifted. Well, the Pärt is based. That particular figuration is based on Baroque violin, but I think I suspect that Langlois de Zwart has that in mind when he's playing this because it really sounds a lot like it. I want to mention another thing about Langlois de Zwart's playing. He's not showy at all. He's always serving the melody, the piece. Now, that's a lot of people go to concerts to hear the performer. You want to hear this person's personality, however oversized it may be. It's very exciting. He's not like that, and I do consider him to be an exciting player, but just because his playing is so beautiful. But he doesn't really, step out and like kind of say, "Okay, this is me now." You never really get that from him. Right. But you're always aware it's him. It's not a criticism. I like his playing a lot, and I like his approach. Okay, so after that prelude, it's very brief. We get to our first violin concerto by Jean-Marie Leclair, French composer. This is his Opus 7, number 5, from his set of works, 6 concertos a tre violini, alto e basso. Has an Italian title. I should have read the booklet note. Now I'm regretting it. Anyway, this one starts out. It's a 3 all these works are 3 movement works, I think. I'm pretty sure they are. Okay.
I think so.
That's pretty normal. Fast, slow, fast. This is a style Vivaldi invented, the whole fast, slow, fast concerto. And he wrote enough of them that they stuck. So there are hundreds of Vivaldi concertos. Anyway, Jean-Marie Leclair, the first movement is vivace, very lively. And we leap straight into this from that prelude that we heard before. So there's no real separation between them. It's a nice transition. Played with good energy. I love the presence of the basso continuo on this recording. The whole recording is very clear. Maybe a bit too much reverb on the solo violin and strings, but it does allow the instruments to breathe, and it gives Langlois de Zwart's sound more body, so I guess I can't really complain about it, but I do notice it. I just wanted to point that out. I remember that Langlois de Zwart's sound is pretty small from previous recordings, but he sounds very present and athletic here in this energetic movement. I love the detail in the bass end of the ensemble on this. This is a really nice recording, actually, that way. The bass end sounds great. Often on Baroque recordings, you'll have the harpsichord and you'll have some cello or something like that all playing the continuo, and they tend to mass together somehow on the recording, but that's not the case here. They're all easy to pick out of the recording, and I really liked that. Catchy, urgent phrasing from the soloist, very appealing. And then we go to the second movement, Largo, the slow movement. It's 4 minutes long. It has a slow and very melodic intro, the kind of thing that Langlois de Zwart excels at. The present sounding string accompaniment undulates palpably. Ooh.
Exciting yourself with your own.
Yeah, it excited me. It kind of reminded me of that Mozart clarinet concerto middle movement, because that sort of thing happens there. The violin comes in sweetly about 45 seconds in. It's got a pretty long wait until it makes its entrance. And this great recording picks up the gentle pattering in the harpsichord. I'm sorry, that's I think the harpsichord and theorbo. A theorbo is like a giant guitar or bigger guitar, and it makes a plucking sound. While the harpsichord is plucked too, but it sounds more chimey, as you know. And there's kind of like nice tactile quality to the sound that I think might be coming from the theorbo. You can hear the plucking coming through the whole. I thought that was really beautiful, really good recording. Because the theorbo isn't up front for the instrument to register, or the harpsichord. I'm pretty sure it might be both. So they're down there in the mix, but they're kind of peeking out. The middle section starts at around 2 minutes and 30 seconds. This is kind of a ternary form, ABA. So the beginning material repeats, and it ends on an open cadence, which falls into the. Whenever we have an open cadence at the end of a movement, I always feel like there's this feeling of like, you're on the edge of a cliff, and then you just kind of just falls forward and free fall sort of into the third movement. And that's kind of what we have here. Allegro assai, very allegro, cheerful, joyful. Noticeable reverb on the energetic opening. This more so than in the rest of the album. But there's a lot of clarity, and probably would have been more without so much room reverb. I do love the way the harpsichord shadows the violin's quick athletic line at around a minute in. This is another fairly long and eventful movement. Good energy throughout. I really enjoyed it. Okay, we come on to Vivaldi, Violin Concerto in B minor. Vivaldi has written so many violin concertos that I don't know, I should talk to a scholar about this one day, a Vivaldi scholar, because I don't think they can keep up with them all either. There's so many. A lot of them are kind of samey, but they're sort of, because he kind of does the same things. He's kind of showy with the violin. It's very bright sounding, usually energetic with a lyrical slow movement in the middle. But okay, so let's talk about this one. I didn't even know if I had ever heard this one before. I'm not sure. I might have. But it sounds a little different here, and that's a good thing. Okay, I said that this one sounds vaguely familiar. I mean, I could go through my Vivaldi collection and see if I actually have this on another recording. I probably do. But this here, it's Vivaldi's concerti are usually pretty aggressively played, and this one is not very aggressively played. It's got sufficient aggression. By the ensemble, they soften the edges of the rhythm, which are usually pretty sharp. You can cut your finger on that stuff. You get too close to your speakers. Anyway, de Zwart is in full flight. His sweet sound not throwing sparks, but raising a smile nonetheless. I found myself smiling a lot through this recording. That's always a good sign, He's very musical, melodic, sweet-toned. Second movement, Largo. A typical Vivaldi slow movement, rather untypically played here, with great sensitivity in the accompanying phrasing, and of course in the violin solo as well. The balance is beautiful, and the movement comes up as something that draws the ear in, rather than merely acting as a break between fast movements, which can often happen in a Vivaldi concerto. Phrasing from both Langlois de Zwart and the ensemble is beautiful, and again, I love the clarity with which all of the accompaniment comes through. Nice continuo, especially from the theorbo, the big guitar, the kind of droning. Well, it doesn't. It kind of gently plucks. It's nice. It's pretty. Third movement, Allegro, is rushing with impressive solo figuration. We expect that of Vivaldi, of course. I like the cello as the continuo with its long, drawn-out notes, providing stability to the harmony at this speed. Next, we get to Pietro Locatelli, Violin Concerto in E minor. Ooh, I rolled that R. Opus 3, number 8. From, here comes another rolled R. L'arte del violino, Opus 3. My rolled R's have kind of gone by the wayside here in Japan. When I go to Italy and speak Italian, I can't do them anymore. I get tired or something. I don't know. The andante is classical sounding in this piece with its balanced phrases. The andante goes on for some time. All the repeats seem to be taken. In fact, this seems like a classical score. It doesn't sound very Baroque to me, although it does have a continuo. So the rhythmic figures sound kind of like a stately dance. At 3 minutes and 45 seconds, the violinist introduces the Capricio Section with arpeggiated figuration, again sounding like the beginning of Pert's Fratres. I'm kind of referencing that piece a lot. If you don't know it, make sure to hear the violin and piano version of it, especially the one played by Gidon Kremer and Keith Jarrett. It's really beautiful. Or the one we recommended with Renaud Capuçon last year. That was a good one too. Does he play that with the piano? I don't remember. I haven't been listening to it lately. Anyway, I should go back to it. So should you, listener. Anyway, the entire section is for a solo violin who goes through different chords using the same figuration. Yeah, the Capriccio section it's for the solo violin only. It's kind of weird. It's like he just steps out, everybody else disappears. And it's a really interesting approach. We're going to hear it again in the third movement. But first, the second movement, Largo, not much slower than the previous movement. It starts with some forbiddingly dark chords sawed out by the strings. When I say sawed out, I kind of mean it's like if you're sawing wood, well, you go back and forth, but the strings are just kind of slashing. The bows are slashing across the strings for that sound. The violin solo starts at about 49 seconds, and he plays a lot of these curling melodies. Always beautiful phrased. I don't think I need to say that again, but I will. Accompaniment includes harpsichord and theorbo, but is string heavy. I did like Langlois de Zwart's sudden, muted sound at the very end of the movement. So you'll notice it when it happens because it just suddenly quietens. It's really nice. Okay, and then the third movement, Allegro, and then we have a Capriccio again. A Capriccio kind of, what it means is it's like a fancy or something you just do off the cuff. So like if you eat a Capricciosa pizza, it just means like the pizza guy just went crazy and put whatever he wanted on the pizza. Basically, that's kind of what it
that can be scary in Japan. You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, well, we don't want people to get too capricious here in Japan. That's for sure, because they can put all kinds of oddities on that pizza. Let me tell you, and they do.
Corn and mayonnaise being a couple surprising.
They
ones,
like corn here, but they do that. They do that in parts of like in New England too, in the U.S. Anyway, I don't want to say that because my Italian friends get all angry when they hear about pineapples and pizza. And Lord knows what they would do.
Now, to
if
me,
they heard people put corn on them.
To me, pizza should just have like pepperoni, peppers, and onions. That's it. Maybe sausage. I could even have anchovy, but you know, that's about it. Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, another thing about that drives Italians crazy is that pepperoni in Italian means a green pepper. It doesn't mean those like sausage things. So they get all confused when they go to America.
Yeah.
And they find out that pepperoni is kind of like a hot sausage or something.
It's just a salami, you know.
It's a salami, basically.
Yeah, it's a salami. Anyway, back to the music. I really liked this one on the Capricio. The cadenza is pretty impressive here. There's like
would you call it a cadenza? It's basically the Capriccio. It's not really a cadenza.
Yeah, I mean, but he's all alone for a really extended kind of time, and he plays it with the finesse of a cadenza, with these kind of descending trills, and what a tone on the high notes there. I noted that. It's just like, wow, beautiful sound. You know, sometimes, you know, that's the hair starts to stand up on your neck on that kind of note on the violin, but he makes it sound, you know, so rounded and lovely toned. It's great. Yeah, this is a really exciting movement.
Yeah, and at the end too, there's one particularly interesting bit in the Capriccio. A bit after the 6-minute mark, the violin plays this vibratoless bass line that sounds, I guess, like moaning while it's playing trills and the figuration at the same time. Because he's getting all this like expression out of the trills and figuration, and then there's this bass line that's kind of that has no emotion at all, really, and it's just kind of. It was a really interesting kind of combination of sounds. I was really pulled in by that. I was like, wow, this is really weird. You remember that? Yes. Yeah.
And there's a few sections. I forget which movement is when he's doing, you know, this repeated bass note, and he's doing all of these kind of pyrotechnics above it, and he maintains that composure with the low tone. You know, as about as perfectly a human possible as a human in there, and it's still not perfect because it can't be, because it's such a difficult thing. But you can tell that, you know, he is very conscious of even the tone of that, you know, one repeated note, while all the dazzling stuff is going on way above it, and he makes it sound, you know, almost easy when I know it's anything but. So right. But as you say, his style. He's doing all of these things while not showing off. It's not like he's not adding that extra, like, look at me kind of thing. He never has that,
in fact. So he's well trained that way. Sometimes I like that, but you know,
sure.
It's in fact, I think. Well, I'll leave this for when it happens. I was going to say there might be a pianist coming up that's got a lot of rather unique flair in the way he plays. Oh. But we'll get to that, you know, in future weeks. Anyway, next is Jean-Marie Leclair, again, violin concerto in D major, Opus 10, number 3. Starts with an Allegro Moderato movement. This one has a very regal opening with this broad rhythm, leaving a lot of space for the ensemble to play its material in. It sounds like it sounds like this big unfurnished room that this whole army can march into. The violin comes in with double stopping in this very impressive entry. Double stopping. We sometimes have new listeners, I guess, that don't know the classical music terminology. It's when you're playing two notes or more at the same time on the violin. So it's like a chord. Okay, it's hard to do to keep them both in tune. Very warm melodic material follows, and when the solo finishes, the ensemble repeats its opening material. The violin solos in its upper range in its second solo section. And towards the end, the rhythm breaks down and the violin plays this cautious figure. This is almost like something Beethoven would do. And then starts again at full speed to put the harmony back together again, like a spider rapidly repairing a web. The whole pace, it's like the film speeded up or something and he put it all together again. The whole pace of the piece is relaxed and confident. It's some interesting details in there. Second movement, Andante, starts with quarter note chords played slowly, like when dun, 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 dun. They're just repeating. You're just waiting for something interesting, which is going to be the melody, right? The violin begins its melodic theme over that, like a singer singing to accompaniment. It's a gorgeous melody. It would have to be with that kind of accompaniment because that's all the interest is going to be on the solo instrument. Gorgeous melody and rich accompaniment here. The violin and accompaniment gets gentler and fainter at the end, keeping the repetitive material interesting. So what this composer doesn't do in this particular case with harmonic interest, he does with dynamics, or they do with dynamics. I'm not really sure if he's marked this, but it turns out to be an interesting movement. Allegro Monontropol, this has a dancey rhythm with triplets, and I counted this in 9/8 time because it was like da 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 da. That's what I got. I don't know. That's how I heard it anyway. And an odd line that rises but doesn't fall at the end, which kind of gives it a sort of unbalanced profile to the melody, which the rest of the material emulates. When the violin solos, he adds a downward balancing figures. There's a gorgeous tone and phrasing by Zwart. How many times have I said this already? Yes, as throughout the album. But it's true. It's just it's really beautiful playing throughout. A pleasing conclusion to this work with some false cadences followed by an unsure cadential ending. It's like he forgot how to do a cadence. It's fantastic. I loved it. It sounds harmonically fumbled. Because it doesn't end. It ends on a cadence, but it's not a big, strong cadence. I guess you'd call it a feminine cadence. We were talking about this last week. Yeah. With our yin and yang. All right. Antonio Vivaldi. We have another one of those preludes based on a trio, in this case, Trio Sonata RV60. This one uses a droning bass. It's Vivaldi's melody, but it's not really Vivaldi. This is something that the musicians put together from his material. This particular one uses a droning bass over which the violin flies like a bird with its arpeggios. It ends and goes right into the Vivaldi concerto. This is Violin Concerto in C major, RV 179A, subtitled Per Anna Maria, for Anna Maria. I'm sure she was really happy with this. All right. Allegro Monontropol. This has another regal beginning. Regal, king-like. Okay. Much like Leclair's work that we just heard. This quickly changes to something straightforward in 4/4. I'm so used to flashiness in Vivaldi's concertos that this comes as a welcome surprise. It's a bit slower than we usually hear with Vivaldi's music, and the violin's tone isn't overly bright, which might be due to I think he's using gut strings. I don't know though. Again, I didn't read the booklet for this. I am remiss this week. So we hear the piece with the music emphasized over virtuosity. This is Langlois de Zwart's tone really grabs my ear, and I think he's on my list for all future releases. Not that we're going to talk about them all on the podcast, but I'm going to be listening to everything he puts out this year, and I probably want to talk about it again because it's all been so good so far. Largo movement, slow movement with pairs of chords followed by a pause. And this piece proceeds like this as the violin winds melody over the space. The violin builds to winding, fluttery patterns and sounds gorgeous throughout this slow movement. At one point, the violin seems to run out of steam, and its melody ticks down to a slower tempo. Then it delivers a heartfelt lament, probably at its lost energy. Third movement is an allegro, and I'm not really sure how this was put together. It's unpublished, and this third movement was reconstructed by Olivier Fauré, and lively celebratory energy in this fast movement, perhaps the liveliest on the album. The violin is put through its paces at this speed, particularly at 2 minutes and 40 seconds on, while the ensemble sounds slightly more aggressive than on previous tracks. There's some impressive double stopping by the violinist after the 3 minute and 10 second mark, and lovely high note patterns after 3 minutes and 45 seconds. I'm wondering if those are harmonics. I really like the sound. This is an impressive movement. It really doesn't sound like it doesn't sound like Vivaldi's form. So I think the reconstruction may have, because Vivaldi tends to be really compact, and this feels like it's really spreading out a bit. The violin winds down the scale, playing figuration all the way until it arrives at a cadence point, at which point it plays a light cadenza, then resolves to the explosive rhythm that leads us to the quick ending. Yeah, I love this album. It was musical all the way through. Théotime Langlois de Zwart has a great tone and endearing phrasing of melodic lines, and I want to hear everything he does. Highly recommended, listener. This is my classical pick of the week. Definitely hear this.
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot too. Great tone, lots of finesse, good style. He makes it sound easy. The recording is excellent. As you say, there's a bit of reverb in there, but the balance is excellent between the violin and the ensemble. Everything's clear, and the low end comes out, as you said. I'd recommend putting this one on in the morning when you get up. If you have a little time before work, get that strong cup of coffee, and the rhythmic energy and the way he performs this with smoothness will get you just pumping, but not agitated. It's going to get your brain waves aligned and get you in a good mood. This is really positive and well-performed Baroque music here. So you can't go wrong. Definitely listen to this.
Next one. Okay, this is a really enjoyable album too, and it's kind of unique. Horn and Piano, a Basse Recital. And this is by the similar sounding named Teunis van der Zwart, with a Z for you British people out there, and not an S like Théotime Langlois de Zwart. Teunis van der Zwart on Basse, and Alexander Melnikov on the forte piano. Now, if you listen to a lot of classical music, Alexander Melnikov's name might be familiar from he's Isabel, the violinist Isabel Faust's normal accompanist, and he often plays that forte piano. It's an early piano, the one that Beethoven would have played around that era. This is on the Harmonium Mundi label as well. Okay. Now, this is a pretty interesting release because, first of all, we need to understand what a basse is. I didn't know. I picked up this record thinking, it's a French horn, but it's not. So let me explain this. I actually read the notes to this one, and he said that this album is the result of his PhD research into the sound and technique of Giovanni Punto, who was a famous horn virtuoso in the 19th century, and his name isn't even really Giovanni Punto. That was his stage name.
That's the interesting part of the story that I looked up too. This is a great story.
You want to tell it? Go ahead, because I just have that. His name is Jan Václav Stich.
Stich, yeah, he's Czech, right?
He's Czech, yeah.
So apparently he was, like his family they were serfs or something, right? I mean, they were just, lower class, but he somehow got into service of a count there, and then he was there for, I guess, 4 years or something for this count, and then he and a group of friends ran away, and the count,
I have heard about this guy.
The count who had invested money into his education, right, got really angry, and so he put out a hit on him. Basically, he got a bunch of soldiers, and the orders were to knock his front teeth out so that he couldn't play the horn anymore.
That's really mean.
Yeah, and so Stich escaped into Italy, into the Holy Roman Empire, and he became Giovanni Punto. That's a pretty interesting story. They never caught up with him, so yeah.
Yeah, and he became this really famous virtuoso, too. Yeah. So you would think they would have heard of him eventually, but maybe they didn't know who he was.
So I guess this instrument, it looks kind of like a French horn it's a wrapped up thing, but you don't have any valves on it.
I just want to say that when it hits put on you, most people are trying to run away from Italy. He kind of
exactly. That's what I was thinking too. Yeah,
because there was a composer. Yeah. It might have been Caldara who was actually murdered by his debtors. I don't know.
Wow.
Classical music is wild and woolly, people. I don't know why it's not more popular. Anyway.
All kinds of good drama to go with it.
That's what we're for. We're going to change that.
So I guess this instrument, what I found entertaining about this recording is this technique of using the hand in the bell, which I guess assists with the different pitches you get, because otherwise you have to rely on your lip. But it results in some interesting kind of tonal variations and almost like wah-wah mute kind of effects with it. So it's very interesting to see the technique at work.
The soloist here tells us a little bit about how he does that. Oh boy, look at this. I had spell check came to my rescue and changed the spelling of core bass to C-O-R-E, core, bass. Oh my God. What is that? The core bass. Okay, no, core bass is it's a French word. Yeah. Low horn, it means. Okay, so he uses a core bass mouthpiece, which I guess is wider than a regular horn's mouthpiece in this case, a higher horn. And he uses ornamentation, and at one point that I heard, multiphonics in his playing.
Yes,
multiphonics, it was only once, right? I only heard one clearly. Yeah. Produced by playing one note and singing another note through the instrument. That's how
it would make sense that he's using a bigger mouthpiece, because he does have some passages that get really low, much lower than a French horn would be able to. So
the French horn is hard enough to play. I keep hearing people talk about that.
That has valves, little rotary valves. This thing looks like it would be a real challenge to make music on.
Yeah. Okay, so the way that works, multiphonics, if the frequencies of the two sounds are harmonically related, a combination tone or resultant tone will be perceived, and the best result produces a pure fifth, which is what we're going to hear when this...
Yeah, we heard some of that on the trombone recording a few weeks ago. Some really crazy stuff with multiphonics.
Yeah, by the way, none of these double or triple tones, whenever you hear these, are written into the score, and neither are any of the ornaments. So anything you hear that varies from the main melody is all put there by the soloist. Let's see, Van der Zwart says that he's seeking the almost forgotten sounds and technique of the core bass, and he's hoping the recording will contribute for a revival of the velvety timbre. And that's a good word. It is kind of velvety.
It's a bit fluffy, yeah.
Fluffy, velvety, and it's also not it's not penetrating. It's not one of those sounds that's gonna kind of go through the walls and, impale your neighbors or anything like that. like a regular brass instrument can, or it's kind of it's I don't know, something like wider about it or something. It just doesn't penetrate as much. It just kind of, it's a nice sound, I guess. Now, the piece I like the best on this album is the first one by Beethoven, Horn Sonata Opus 17 in F major, and this was first performed on, guess what date? 18 April 1800. And we will be uploading this podcast, I think, on 18 April in Japan anyway. Yeah. So you'll be hearing this on the 222nd. Oh, it's a magic number. 222nd anniversary of its premiere, if you listen to it on that day. Okay. Now, Punto, a.k.a. Stitch, we'll call him Punto. That's his stage name. And Beethoven playing the piano. This is 1800, before Beethoven's hearing loss really happened. He knew it was happening in around 1803, but so he was still playing at this time. Beethoven admired Punto's sound and wrote this for him. And as far as we know, this was the first sonata for this type of horn ever written. And I have to tell you, Teunis van der Zwart understands Beethoven's sense of humor, because there are a lot of things in this piece that really kind of are startling and kind of funny, and intentionally so. They're put there by Beethoven, and van der Zwart gets it, and I was kind of happy to hear that. This first movement, Allegro Moderato, is the sonata form movement. Actually, the other ones might be too. I shouldn't say that. No, actually they're not. This is the sonata form. The horn starts this piece solo with a fanfare. The forte piano sounds really lightweight by comparison, to be honest. Actually, a modern piano probably would have sounded better with this instrument, but they're going for the period sound here, like what you would have heard if you were at that concert. But the forte piano sounds pretty full when it's playing chords and running accompaniment in the bass. You almost forget that it's an early piano when you hear that. The horn actually gets a lot of interesting sounds, especially in its lower end.
Yeah.
We don't know much about,
There's some like blaring kind of effects and things that come out of it.
I really enjoyed that. Those. That kind of thing. And it's funny by nature just to hear those sounds. So, and I'm sure Beethoven, believe it or not, did have a sense of humor. There are a lot of moments, especially in his earlier works, where that comes out a bit. In his heroic period, you don't hear it all that much, but it comes out sometimes. All right, so we don't know much about performance styles with this type of horn, but the sounds you hear here would be about what a person in 1800 would have heard. Van der Zwart has a good sense of Beethoven's sense of humor, as I mentioned. There are some nice timing deliveries calculated to raise a smile in this performance. Also, the horn is capable of delivering a wide dynamic range. He has a lot, and so is the fortepiano to an extent. It doesn't have the dynamic range of a modern piano, but it delivers quite a bit. He has a lot of interesting phrasing ideas, which is where a lot of the humor comes from. And he varies the melodic material and draws out new ways of hearing it. I especially like the honk that the horn gives on its last three notes. Make sure you're ready for those. Actually, if you're not ready for those, don't worry, you'll hear them anyway. They kind of draw your attention. Okay, second movement, Poco Adagio. This is very short. It's only like a little over a minute long. It sounds like a short funeral march at the beginning, but the horn's approach shapes it as something a bit ungainly, which is humorous and intentionally so, I believe. Then we go to the third movement, Rondo, Allegro Moderato. The previous movement cadences directly into the opening rondo theme here, and this is a technique Beethoven used more famously in his violin concerto and fifth piano concerto, The Emperor, where there's like kind of like a build up at the end of the second movement, and then the cadence is the beginning of the third movement. So this might be the first time he did that, although I'm not really sure. Again, Van der Zwart has a good sense of the humor in this piece, as in just after a minute when he gets a repeating phrase and draws it out more emphatically each time he plays it, like he's getting impatient with it. It's kind of cute. He had me in good spirits throughout. Basically, the piano plays its material straight, so it's kind of like, the piano would be Abbott and the horn would be Costello, I guess.
I think that's why the humor comes out in this, because the compositions themselves, Beethoven sort of sets them in a very traditional classical kind of structure with a lot of devices that you're going to expect to hear. And then every once in a while, you'll get a little bit of the horn, joking on that, doing something unexpected that you don't think is going to come up next. So you can kind of imagine the interplay and the humor, that he wrote, knowing that this is a sort of a piece written for a specific performer. You can sort of get that inside jokes that they might have been hinting at and setting up with, the flow of the composition. So,
well, we don't know if these were them, but I mean, they may as well have been, because they sound great. Yeah. Basically, the piano plays its material straight and sometimes excitedly, and the horn sounds exasperated at having to play with this guy. It's cute, really. I liked it. The horn gets some pretty impressive repeated notes after the 3-minute and 15-second mark, showing some nice technique on this. It sounds like a kind of a cumbersome instrument to play. Yeah. There's a fantastic blaring note after 3 minutes 50 seconds. Again, if you leave your stereo to the refrigerator to make a sandwich, you might drop it at this point, because it's really obvious when this happens.
Squeeze all the mustard out at once.
Yeah. You don't want to have a squeeze bottle in your hand at that point. I guess it's the nature of the instrument that makes Van der Zwart the comedian in this piece, and it's a great ending blaring note as well. Now, one of the reasons I'm thinking these are all funny is because the rest of these pieces on this album really aren't. They're really just kind of... They don't really have much of a sense of humor. They're very kind of formal, really. So, okay, so are we ready to go on? Okay, so Ferdinand Ries, Horn Sonata, Opus 34 in F major. Ferdinand Ries was a contemporary of Beethoven, and... his music it's really good. It's very well formed. He's really well worth hearing, he's got good melodic ideas. The thing is, Beethoven was so overwhelmingly original in this period that we just ignore every other composer that was composing at the time, unless they were like writing opera or something, you know. But Ferdinand Ries, he actually worked as Beethoven's secretary at one point too. But he composed like 300 works of his own, including this one, and they're worth hearing. They're good. They're just not as original as Beethoven. That's the thing. Just don't compare it. You'll like it. It's good. Anyway, the first movement starts Larghetto, and then that's the introduction. And then there's an Allegro Molto, which is the main section. So this has a serious opening, solid tone from the horn. It sounds romantic. It sounds like it's kind of, I don't know what year it was written in, but then again, Ries died very young. I think he was around 50 or so. He died in 1838, 11 years after Beethoven. So the 1830s were really the Romantic era, and this beginning sounds romantic to me. The piece is played straightforwardly and rather dramatically, so it's, again, this is not a humorous piece or approach, and that's why I think there was a lot of comedy in the Beethoven piece. There are a lot of Beethovenian elements in this piece, I guess, as you would expect. He was such a big influence. It's a fairly long movement at 11 minutes, 36 seconds, with a lot of material developing and then being interrupted by repeated notes from the horn. It's pretty interesting, actually. We get a straight sonata form here.
And as far as the technique goes, it sounds like he's utilizing his hand a lot in the bell for various things. So you'll notice a change in the tone as he works that way. I found that kind of interesting. The character of the instrument changes with that, so
it changes quite a bit as well. It's kind of interesting. Okay, the Andante is a short middle movement with dark brooding, repeating chords from the lower end of the forte piano, starting it off. Both instruments are able to get off some brooding low sounds, especially the horn, who's impressively expressive. Oh, I'll say that 3 times. Impressively expressive throughout. This is a pretty dark sounding movement. It's kind of an interesting, almost like a kind of painting a dark mood or something. And then we have a rondo at the end, memorable, led by the horn. The piano repeats the theme, and this goes pretty straightforwardly, really.
There's a nice little pitch bend in that last one. That caught my ear. Listen for that. I didn't mark down where it exactly is, but
I didn't write that down either. Oh well. All right. Next is a concerto, horn concerto in E major by Giovanni Punto himself. The soloist who was the famous virtuoso that this album is taking after. So this is a concerto, means that it would have a full orchestra supporting it. And here we have Alexander Melnikov, the forte pianist's arrangement of the concerto for horn and forte piano, which was an activity that was common enough in its day. And these types of things got more virtuosic when Franz Liszt came on the scene about 20 or 30 years later. Well, actually, in the 1830s, he was already there, but he started doing these transcriptions, I think, in the 1850s or so. All right, the first movement, Allegro Moderato. Now, this really sounds like a straight concerto style, because you get a lot of all of the material is introduced by the piano in this case. It would be done by the orchestra, because it's like giving the soloist an introduction, sort of, so that he can kind of come out and really knock him out. It's kind of weird in this format, though, because we're so used to hearing the violin and piano or the soloist, the two instruments as equal partners, but that's not the case here. Here, the horn is the main interest. And I got so used to the piano's lower end in the previous piece, because it sticks around the bass a lot, that it sounds much brighter here. It might even be different instrument for all I know, as it plays the opening of the concerto material, or Melnikov arranged it to sound that way. There's a lot of exposition before the horn soloist comes in. The horn is showing off tone more than anything else, I think, in this movement. It's a pretty straightforward movement, and it's written by Punto himself, so you want to think, what is he's writing for his sound or for his technique. So what is it that he wants to show off or put across?
Yeah, he gets down really low in a low register, lower than we've heard here. And, the technique is pretty impressive, too. So I could see he was writing this to show off what he was able to do, yeah.
You're right. He just sticks to kind of a cookie-cutter sonata form in this. All the interest really comes in the solo playing and the tone that he gets. There's some virtuosic material towards the end at about the 5-minute mark. And van der Zwart takes this pretty slowly and gets a bit of his sense of humor in by tapering off in the lower notes, so they kind of almost disappear when they come. He gets a cadenza at the end. This is a concerto after all, in which he demonstrates a lot of the sounds the horn can make. And this is where we hear the multiphonics.
Multiphonics, yeah.
You could hear it just before the 7-minute mark. It really stands out. So you're hearing 2 horn sounds at once. And if you listen carefully enough, if you realize this is happening, you'll hear that one of them is a vocalized sound that's being kind of done through the horn. It's a brief cadenza, and the movement comes to a quick conclusion. Okay, second movement, Adagio, has a mournful opening from the forte piano. The horn starts its melody high in its range and really goes through all of its range in this brief movement just over 3 minutes long, including some very cool low notes. There's a nice cadential trill at the end, too, done by the horn.
This is
very
the one
impressive on a horn. Yeah.
Where I thought some of the hand technique in the bell actually gets that kind of plunger effect going, because the tone varies so much when he does that, that I guess that's some, unique characteristic of what happens in order to, have that technique on this instrument. So it's pretty interesting.
Right. Okay, third movement is Rondo à la chasse, so a hunting rondo. So it's got this hunting rhythm, kind of like a galloping sort of rhythm, and theme from the horn. The contrasting themes contrast pretty sharply, because it's got this the rondo theme sounds pretty cheerful, and then all the other themes are all kind of introspective and dark, and then all of a sudden it's all cheerful again when the rondo theme comes back. It was kind of nice.
This one, he gets some kind of impressive tonguing techniques on these sextuplet, double triplet things, and then some really scooping final low notes that are very interesting on this one too, I thought. Yeah.
All right, and finally we have Franz Danzi, 1763 to 1826. So he was really the classical era as well. Really, he's really Mozart's era, and it sounds like that. Horn Sonata, Opus 28 in E flat major. This is a big opening movement. The first movement is Adagio - Allegro. So when you see that, you have an introduction and a main section. Excuse me. A big opening movement with an introduction. The fortepiano gets some ruminating melodic material in the intro, while the horn essentially accompanies, which is kind of surprising. The more active main Allegro section features some appealing classical era type harmonies, and I would think Mozart more than Beethoven at this point. The piano has a lot to do in this movement, and he takes a lot of the lead. I do like the horn's phrasing here. He comes up with a variety of ways to present the material. Not all of it pretty, and that's by design as well. Some of it has a kind of legato where the notes melt into each other as if they're being melted in the heat. So they're kind of being disformed. You know what I'm talking about here? Again, he's creative in his approach throughout this album, really. I really enjoyed this horn player's approach, really. He doesn't just play straight. He really does take some chances, and I really like that. The Larghetto second movement is a good length at 6 minutes, almost 7 minutes long. It starts with the piano, and I like the pois, 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 pois attack of the horn at the beginning. Always appealing. That's the only time we hear the pois on this album, that kind of attack. The horn takes the melody in the next phrase, and the repeat of the opening material, we can hear some of the ornamentation that van der Zwart adds. Again, that's not in the score. He's doing that himself. He ornaments a bit in the development section, then plays the recapitulation at the end fairly straight. I like that approach when suddenly the melody is naked again. You're not really hearing the ornamentation, and you're just hearing it as it is. Both instruments get beautiful quiet tones at the end. Really nice. And the third movement, Allegro, again, the piano introduces the material. Again, another rondo. They really loved this formed for last movements in the classical era. And the piano always plays the rondo theme. The chord basse is the star in the contrasting material. So this is an album full of pieces that aren't heard enough, but it's the horn that's the real star here, and especially its sound. Van der Zwart draws a lot of surprising tones from it throughout the recording, and his phrasing is always creative in ways that serve the compositions. I found myself drawn into this throughout. I liked it.
Yeah, definitely something different. Should be of interest to all brass players who, regardless of which instrument you play. Of course, for horn players, French horn, but I found it as a trumpet player. I found myself, analyzing what his technique is and the different kinds of attacks and the tones this instrument gets. And then it's obviously a technical challenge playing, this style instrument. It doesn't have all the modern conveniences of modern brass instruments, but he has impressive technique, and but he also has a lot of fun while he plays this too. Bringing out some humorous points. About it. So I thought, interesting tones and impressive flexibility from a challenging instrument, and in pieces you're not going to usually hear. So it was something very interesting to listen to.
Yeah, including a Beethoven work that you're not going to hear too often either, I don't think. Okay, so my last classical recording of the evening is Jonathan Dove, Judith Weir, and who's this guy? Matthew Martin. Okay, I just wrote Martin. These are choral works, sacred choral works, performed by the choir of Westminster Abbey. Peter Holder on the organ, James O'Donnell directing, and this is on Hyperion Records, and that means you're not going to be able to stream it, but we'll give you a link. Okay, the reason I wanted to do, I
gotta say this is a religious recording, that will bring the fear of the Lord into your living room with the sound of this organ, because
is a nice sounding
this organ is absolutely massive, and there's some parts of this Abbey, that I thought the apocalypse was coming when those low notes and the attacks on the organ. It's pretty visceral in the effect that this instrument has here.
The organ's bass notes bored a hole into my chest cavity.
Yeah, it's like that. Yeah, and I'll save when we get to that one part. But even if you're not religious, you might be by the end of this recording. So.
That's how we get them. Right. Anyway, I wanted to do this album because we heard, I think, at least Jonathan Dove. I think Judith Weir was also on the one of the Christmas albums that we did in our Christmas show in December. And I'd mentioned at the time that I wanted to hear more music by them because Jonathan Dove, these are all younger composers and they're all contemporary composers.
Right.
And they're all choral composers primarily. And it's a funny thing. There are composers for the guitar who don't really write for other instruments. They write for the guitar. And then there are people who just excel at choral composition, and they don't really do anything else. You get to think they're kind of like the Chopin of the choir, I guess. Chopin wrote only for the piano. Well, mostly for the piano. And there are composers who write just for choirs, too. Oh, man, who am I thinking of here? My brain isn't working. Anyway.
Well, it makes sense in a way. I mean, when you're dealing with, lyrics and, considering the sort of enunciation and phrasing, I think it's a different approach together. So I think I can see where it could converge, but especially listening to these vocal arrangements, there's some really unique things happening in the distance between the voices in some places is really shocking in a way. It creates these huge, intervallic spaces in the music that, it's really, really interesting. I found this one.
Yeah, it would have been nice to see a video of this being performed or to hear it in surround. You kind of get a better idea of the placement of the voices and stuff. Anyway, so I did want to hear like some non-Christmas music by these composers, and this came out, and I had to grab it and listen. Anyway, these are all sacred works, and the first one is Jonathan Dove. Actually, this program is divided into these sections for these three composers. So you're going to hear all Jonathan Dove works at first, then we'll hear Judith Weir, and then Matthew Martin at the end. So we start with Jonathan Dove, who's really a contemporary star, really, in the choral music world. He's well known and respected, I guess. This piece is called Vast Ocean. He was born in 1959, by the way, so you can figure out his age from that. He's a little older than us. Vast Ocean of Light, written in 2010. And this was inspired by the words of Phineas Fletcher, an English Renaissance poet. The text inspired Dove to write some kind of numinous music. That's a great word, numinous.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the piece has a sense of spaciousness, ostinato figurations, and mesmerizing changes of harmony. That's the booklet talking. What I have to say about it is that it starts with a light organ swirling figuration and boys' choir singing the text. Heavenly and beautiful. This is pretty stunning. It's a unique sound as well. Some odd chords follow as the men's voices come in and accompany. No women, by the way, in these choirs. It's just men and boys. The pace of the vocals quicken from the line, "Who lends the sun his sparkling drop?" The organ figuration is very appealing throughout. In fact, the organ is fantastic through this entire album. It's it has some great parts, and not just because of the player, Peter Holder, but just the what's written for him here. It's really fantastic. There are quite a few subtle changes of the stops to change the organ sound as the piece progresses, which was also it kind of appealed to that subtle side that I like to hear. I really like subtlety in music a lot. The Westminster Abbey Choir have appealed to me for years, and I'm always kind of interested in hearing what they're doing, depending on who the composer is, I guess. Otherwise, I would have even less money than I have now, because I would have bought all their recordings too. This recording brings back happy memories of older recordings, as well as allowing me to hear these new compositions. Anyway, this particular piece ends on the wonderful line, "What night can hide eternal day?" An appropriate thought for Easter, as it turns out. With no bass voices or pedals on the organ there. Okay. Tracks 2 through 5, we get another Jonathan Dove piece, the Misa Brevis, written in 2009. Misa Brevis means just short mass, and it's usually missing the credo, which this one is. The movements are usually pretty short. The Kyrie eleison, Lord have mercy, features droning fourth intervals. I like a good drone.
Yeah.
And, the melody in this piece is an appealing modal melody, and that's always great, too. The organ brings a lot of... So it's got like it kind of brings us back into the past when we hear a modal melody in church. The organ brings a lot of mystery to the setting, beautiful sounds. We hear the fourth interval full on at 2 minutes and 45 seconds towards the end of the piece. Second part, Gloria in excelsis Deo, glory to God in the highest. Here the organ features prominently, and this is done as a lively dance with a Stravinskian sense of irregular meters. Very, very unusual. By the way, a little music history from the church. The church, if you listen to those old Renaissance masses, they didn't have much rhythm in them because the church didn't want rhythm in any music played in church, because when you heard rhythm, you wanted to dance, and when you wanted to dance, you wanted to do other things. You wanted to seduce or things like that, and these thoughts weren't welcome in church, so they kind of kept them away. This is very much a 21st century approach here. So hearing the organ in this dancey mode is interesting. We don't really usually hear the organ dance like this or play a dancey rhythm.
This organ is huge in this movement. I said it huffs and it puffs. It's just like, it sounds,
and it probably like, could blow the church down if it wanted to.
It really gets bellowing in this one,
I want to make a movie where somebody just plays the lowest bass pedal at full volume and brings the church down around the organ, and only the organ is standing.
Well, like I told you when I listened to this, I sent you a message. If you got a subwoofer or you've got your big speakers, you definitely want to have that going for this, because
and I did.
Organ is one of the few instruments, a regular electric bass gets down to around, 40 hertz or so, but organ can get down, below 20. It's that foundation rattling, fundamental tones there. And this album has some of those on there.
And maybe I'll take my house down one day with the by playing this album. We'll have to see. The sound though is mostly bass free in the dancing part. And the transparency of the recording is great here too. You can hear through to the end. The organ sounds far away, like a faraway dance, and at times the organ will ram down the bass pedal with chords to give you some good chest cavity resonance, as Russ was just saying. And the choir itself sounds joyous throughout and solemn, glory in God. Okay, that's an appropriate mood. Okay, joyous. And the solemn in the brief, quiet section after 2 minutes. Appealing. Good chest cavity rumbling bass right at the end of the movement, too. Third movement, okay, so we skip the credo in a Misa Brevis, and so we go right to the Sanctus and Benedictus. This goes against convention by being spirited rather than solemn, although that's the booklet note saying that I remember the Bach Mass in B minor Sanctus as being really joyous, which is, I guess in the Baroque era they were just happier. They thought everything was going to work out. Thank goodness they didn't live into the 20th century. They would have been very disappointed. Anyway, 2 climbing figures for the trebles are the focus. The organ features prominently in both inner movements. And starts with the organ playing kind of appoggiatura type chords that resolve upwards to the main chord. Rather mysterious in the quieter middle part, and the appoggiaturas come back at the end in the Hosanna in Excelsis text. Fourth and final movement, Agnus Dei, the Lamb of God, features droning fourth intervals. We heard a lot of these. I guess this is the thing with Jonathan Dove, huh? Mm-hmm. Which resolves to the more familiar and consonant fifth at the end. The fourths and glassy chords in the upper register of the organ are very appealing. Excellent composing by Dove. He had my ear all the way through all of his works, really. He gets a lot out of the instrument. For the most part, the choir's harmonies are more straightforward, though there are creative touches there too. This setting of the Agnus Dei is rather solemn and candlelit. Okay, the last of the Jonathan Dove pieces is called They Will Rise, from 2018. This was written for the 100th anniversary of the Royal Air Force, so They Will Rise is kind of a good analogy. Yeah. It turns out that Jonathan Dove's uncle, Desmond Downer, was a rear gunner in the Lancaster bombers, and he was lost in action in the Second World War, so this anthem is dedicated to him. The text was taken from Isaiah 40:31. The choral textures and undulations of the accompaniment provide a glimpse of the vastness of the heavens, I guess from an airplane. Creative setting with the organ accompaniment and the choral textures with the organ supporting them make up a totally appealing sound. I really enjoyed this as well. Jonathan Dove. We'll have to hear more of him. Next, we get to our second composer, Judith Weir. Her first piece is The True Light from 2018. Incidentally, she was born in 1954, so she's slightly older than Jonathan Dove and older than us, too. Anyway, 2018 for The True Light. The words are from John's Gospel and Psalm 107. There's a solemn opening in recollection of the First World War, whose end of this piece was commissioned to commemorate. And there's a contrasting section, and John's words return. So there's a simple beginning with the organ playing figures, followed by a pause in which a note is held. The bass voices start the choral singing. I love the chords the boys are singing in this. The middle section is a little livelier, with the boys' voices featuring prominently. Men's are supporting. The organ gets some dancey rhythms to play in its figures here, and the long organ interlude leads back to the John text. Next piece, His Mercy Endureth Forever from 2015. Again, Judith Weir. This was commissioned by Her Majesty's Government and the Dean and Chapter of Westminster to mark the 70th anniversary of VE Day. And it's in two parts. So it begins with the text drawn from Psalm 136, built on pedal points. Always a nice thing. And totally based around G. And then there's a detour to E flat at the work's center. And E flat forms the foundation of the second section. There's some nice swooping choral patterns in the first section. We hear the E flat key take hold on the line Eternal God, in whose kingdom no sword is drawn. Lots of pedals on the organ here, providing mighty bass. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of bass I like. Mighty bass. All right. Last Judith Weir piece is called Truly I Tell You from 2014, and this is in ternary form. Boy, there's a long booklet note for this that I wrote down. The first part is taken from verses 4 to 9 of Psalm 8. It has rising figurations in the organ accompaniment. Starts in E flat major, but we arrive at G major. So she seems to like this key. The key which underpins the largely homophonic gestures of the choir. The text here is taken from Mark 10:15. By the way, when we say homophonic, we mean that there's one main melody and the rest are accompanying. The rest of the harmony accompanies that. And the key reverts to E flat major again in a more restrained manner for trebles and tenors. Okay, and it goes on. I will say that this piece has a nice triplet patterns in the vocal line at the beginning. The Truly I Tell You section is introduced by a heavenly and interestingly timbred organ pattern played melodically without chords. The third section, I Will Bless the Lord, reintroduces organ chords, and the harmonic blend of choral singing and organ is warm and appealing. Okay, our last composer, Matthew Martin, who was born in 1976, the youngest one here. We're older than him. Sigh. Anyway, In the Midst of Thy Temple, written in 2019, let's see. This starts with powerful roiling organ chords that quieten for the choir to start. The text alternates between Latin and English in this piece. The opening and closing sections are Latin, and the middle two verses are English. Each verse gets a different musical profile. There's a dissonance in the organ providing momentum for the choral singing, and the organ has fanfare-like motifs played softly like an army preparing to blast out a fanfare. The English sections are far more energetic in both the organ's excitable rhythms and the choir's enthusiastic delivery. And the third section is more chordal and rock-like. I guess the word would be marmoreal. Okay. While the closing Latin section quietens down again as the organ provides us with glimpses of the cold edges of the universe with its kind of twinkling sounds. That's kind of something I remember hearing in Messiaen a lot. Hearing it here without Messiaen's odd harmonies. Okay, Matthew Martin again, the Westminster Service. This is kind of a traditional thing where you'll set the Magnificat. The Magnificat means magnify. My soul doth magnify the Lord. It's the prayer that Mary supposedly spontaneously sings after Gabriel announces that she was going to give birth to Jesus. And then the Nunc Dimittis. The Nunc Dimittis is kind of a parallel to that. This is from Luke's Gospel, and it's when Simeon, who was promised, when Jesus is brought to the temple as a baby, and Simeon, who was promised he would not die until he had seen the Messiah, finally sees the baby Jesus, recognizes him as the Messiah, and says the prayer, Nunc Dimittis, now let your servant depart in peace. Beautiful. Anyway, it's been set many, many times, both of these together. A pairing known as the Westminster Service. It's set from Westminster, that's why it's called that. Martin's Magnificat opens with the organ playing some unanchored chords while the boys' voices reach their highest register. The middle quietens and allows us to hear the beauty of the boys' angelic voices. This ends on a kind of natural fade. And for the Nunc Dimittis, the organ notes sound like individual glowing lights. I really liked the effect. The boys sing a monophonic melody. Monophonic means that they're all singing the same note or the same melody, or they could be singing in octaves too. It's a lovely setting. This prayer has always moved me. It's from Luke's Gospel. And I explained what this is, Simeon again. Okay. The music ends again on a natural fade. By the way, monophonic singing is what you hear when you go to a soccer or football match. So you might want to pull out that word if you really want to be beaten up by your friends. I enjoyed the monophonic singing of the people in the bleachers.
The hooligans?
The hooligans, yeah. I thought it was very monophonic. Not an insult. That's just what it is. It's everybody singing the same note. Okay. But people will nevertheless be insulted by it. Okay. As I ponder that further. Okay. Next, Matthew Martin again. Sitivit anima mea. My soul thirsts. This is from 2002. This is a setting of Psalm 42. It's a cappella with some intriguing bass from the men. This sounds like it's entirely the men's choir. It's mostly chord-based from the beginning, but once we hear the words in Latin, fuerunt mihi lacrimae, my tears have been for me, the melody starts streaming like tears. It's actually really a pretty effect.
Yeah, the layers, tone painting. They just move through it. It's pretty cool.
A little tone painting there. The music quietens and slows as the first line is repeated with many repetitions of the title. A satisfying resolve. Good setting. Next, O Oriens, 2012. The melody for this is, we know as O Come Emmanuel as the Christmas song. It's haunting harmonies here and a slower approach to the famous melody. I imagine this is a later verse than the one we usually hear at Christmas. I think this is... just one of the later, I didn't really look it up, but one of the later verses. Moving and enjoyable. Actually, it probably says what it is in the booklet. I don't think I got this far. The first verse is English, the second in Latin, and some pleasingly ear-twisting passing harmonies can be heard in the repeat of the English words. The Latin section is far more solemn and mysterious. There are powerful organ chords, and they provide the light asked for in the text midway through. The Rejoice, Rejoice line is repeated in English as a refrain throughout, and I really enjoyed that that sort of technique of hearing that word.
It's like a whirlwind
rejoice.
of voices that come through.
Yeah.
And then the organ just thunders in after that Rejoice kind of...
Right. Powerful organ chords. Yeah. And not only that, the familiar melody will kind of hook your ear immediately in because
that cadence that's in there. Yeah, it's a real catching thing in the way the melody moves. Yeah.
Finally, Behold Now, Praise the Lord from 2015. This is a setting of Psalm 134. It has scattered lines between the men and the boys, ringing out as the praise demanded of the text. Well, they are the praise demanded of the text, I guess. The organ gets involved in the praise with some nice interjections into the third line. Lift up your hands in the sanctuary and praise the Lord. The piece ends with something sounding like the organ breaking. The last chord, you remember this?
Yeah, this is the last chord. I was going to say, this one scares you into the fear of the Lord because it's a very intense piece. Okay. Yeah, and then the voice, it's interesting because the voices sort of mellow out and you think, you're going to have this peaceful ending. And then the organ is actually terrifying here.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
And it comes in, and what the image I get from this is like a bomber that's coming in on its final approach, and you're going to get blown to oblivion. The tone of the organ just expands and fills the entire space, and it's the presence of the Lord has overtaken you, and it's pretty fearful, this ending.
Yeah. Not only that, the last chord is a pretty dissonant sounding chord. Yeah. And then it's let go of quickly to get like quick this release. Kind of effect. Yeah, quick release. It's an odd way to end the program, I thought, but I had to listen to something else after this so I wouldn't have bad dreams at night.
Be disturbed, yeah.
But it was really a good album all the way through. If you like choral music, I mean, it really behooves you to hear this because they're new choral compositions. It'll give you like a good understanding of what's happening in English choral music today. These are three major players in that field. I wish people could just stream this and listen to it. There's nice bass from the organ throughout and a rich sound, a good sounding recording as well.
Yeah, the organ is almighty and impressive, and it brings that weight and almost a religious experience listening to it. If you have a good system or at least good headphones, you'll capture, the awesome dynamic power and frequency awesome range. Yeah, power. But yeah, in contrast to that, through all these composers, the way that they use the arranging of voices I found very unique. Whereas you have the stratospheric boys' voices way up high, and at the same time you'll have a male adult voice, and the interval space is huge. And so you have these two lines working in these different registers, and then the layers and these other techniques, like we were saying, these kind of whirlwind effects of voice layers coming over each other. I'm not a huge choral music listener myself, but I was thoroughly engaged and impressed. And this is very modern music, and there's some level of dissonance inside of it, but it's a pretty easy listen to, and mostly the harmony is easy to follow, and I think anyone who likes vocal music or looking for something that's has a message in it as well, and the organ is just awesome in its power too. So yeah, I was engaged right straight through to the end.
All right, and there we go for your classical music for this week.
A lot of variety there in instrumentation, style,
for the variety
and everything. Yeah, we go from Baroque to just a couple of years ago. Yeah, right now today. So
I like that. Yeah.
All right, is it jazz time? I think it is.
Always got to end with yesterday. Music from yesterday.
Yeah. So this week's jazz picks, we're going to be all in the piano realm here, and
we are. Yeah.
It sort of pulled out. I picked pieces that I had just listened to briefly and highlighted as being something interesting, but a theme emerged from that, which I think is some kind of I don't want to say if it's exotic, it's ethnic infusion into jazz. And to me, I think this is one of the things I really like most about how jazz is developing. And it's also one of the things that I look for using streaming and having access to all this kind of new music.
Yeah. So a lot of interesting jazz out there.
Yeah, what I mean is, jazz has always been kind of a sponge. I mean, jazz started as this sort of fusion of African rhythms and sort of, things that are a little bit foreign to the development of Western music, blue notes and different kinds of African rhythms and things, and then put in your, Western harmony and melodic development, and you get that in a mix in the United States, and you got a new music form that evolves. But it sort of absorbs all of the kind of Tin Pan Alley and songwriting of early pop music in the 20th century. Starting Gershwin, in addition to being a classical composer, was a great song composer, and then all the other great...
I think he was more of a song composer first. He just kind of made his way to classical music, and then
all the other great songwriters who wrote for the musicals. But right from the beginning, jazz was absorbing new things with Afro-Cuban rhythms brought in the 40s, later Brazilian rhythms, then Indian music with the influence of modal jazz. But I think you can still see jazz.
Get Arab modes too, which we really love today.
Yeah, and we're going to see some of that tonight. And if we look at how jazz is got little scenes around the world and getting players from different cultures, we'll find players bringing their own sort of background of their own ethnic music into the modern jazz scene. And that's what we have tonight. And we've got three very different kinds of infusions here. And we're going to start out with...
It's like tea. It's like an infusion.
It's an infusion. A blood, not transfusion, but infusion. Here. So we're going to start with an interesting infusion here from Tunisia with the Wajdi Riahi trio, a Tunisian young piano player. I think he's only 26 years old, but he's got some interesting stuff going on here. This is on the Fresh Sound New Talent release, came out in February. Mhamdeya is the title. And so we've got Wajdi Riahi on piano, Basil Rahola on bass, and Pierre Herty on drums. Now, Riahi comes from Tunisia, where he's been involved with the Teunis Jazz Club, and he's got a background in Arabic music as well, but he got into jazz playing in the Hard Bop Project in 2015 with his first jazz concert, and others members of the Teunis Jazz Club. He's now, I believe, active in Belgium, and there he's got a few other releases out with other combinations of players as well, and created a project of his own called North Africa. He won a few prizes for, and he also took part in some study with Barry Harris in Italy, so getting more of a American mainstream background infusion in his own playing as well. And now he's studying at the Royal Conservatory of Brussels at the present time, and that's where he's active with his trio now. So this is very kind of unique sounding recording here, and he won, let's see, his trio won the 2021 Young Jazz Talent Competition at the Dinant Jazz Festival. So he's getting some attention for his playing here, and this release I found quite appealing.
So did I.
We've got all original compositions except, I guess one main piece and another exposition on that by Henry Mancini. You probably can guess what the tune is already. It's a jazz standard in a way. Anyway, we'll start out this recording with an original one, Monsoris. This one begins with almost a waltzing theme on the piano that the bass joins in. Drums come in here, and the bass has a kind of melodic solo that gets going, light textures behind it on piano by Riahi. The piano and drums join back in for some more rhythmic variations on this theme, and it comes to a pause midway for Riahi to start some piano improvisations with nice bass interjections by Rahola. Here you'll get a taste right from the first track of Riahi's kind of unique approach. It's a very speedy technique, and he builds up intensity with some nice interplay, bringing things back down soft and then into a vamping pattern for Herty to do some drum work over, and they build the intensity up for another stretch, and then they reset to the beginning piano and bass theme for a soft ending. So it's sort of a theme that goes through this album. Lots of the songs sort of move through different developments, and then they sort of reset and get built up and taken on little journeys with different motifs and things. So I thought
this is an interesting way to put it.
A lot of different flows of rhythms and feels within one tune, and most of the tracks are pretty long. This one's over 9 minutes here.
Yeah. I did notice. But I know they never tired me out, though. There's a lot of space, but there's a lot of ideas as well. And I was kind of...
He seems to be bursting bursting with interesting ideas. Track 2 is another original called Back Home. This one begins with a haunting 8-note bass ostinato line, over which Riahi adds pretty and sad minor kind of modal figures on the piano. A new bass groove emerges, and it shifts back to the original feeling. Riahi gets a swinging feel into the piano figures when the drums kick up in the tune. It slows again into a new groove, and Riahi has a solo, finding kind of blues-tinged ideas mixed with some other concepts. And then a new kind of samba feel, almost, groove is born inside of that. Riahi gets very rhythmic in his ideas, some very impressive rapid lines and percussive playing. Hurdy gets a drum solo, and that leads back to the earlier groove over the ostinato and a final softer section. Again, this is a song that flows through very many rhythmic feels and grooves and transforms. So it's very kind of, flexibly shaped in the kind of rhythmic grooves and places that it goes, much like the first one. Very interesting.
I think the programming here is pretty interesting too. These first 2 tracks were probably my favorite too, and this really pulled me in for the rest. So if you want to sample, you can go for the first 2 tracks. They're both pretty long as well. So,
yeah, this one's over almost 7 minutes as well.
It'll get you in it. Yeah.
Now we're going to get track 3, the first of 2 versions of Moon River by Henry Mancini, and this first one is a solo piano version. And this is really long, almost 9.5 minutes. But it's quite interesting. He begins it with a completely original intro, and you won't know what the tune is, but he does throw in a few snippets of the melody, so you can recognize the famous Moon River melody. And then he makes a new exposition around a cycle of chords that aren't really in the tune.
It really goes off.
Yeah, he takes off for like a little looping detour. Goes around that for a while. There's a beat under which maybe a foot stomp or something. He's just playing piano, but you can hear a kind of rhythmic pulse in there. He may be just doing that himself. Now he finally presents the tune with some nice counter melody lines and very dainty or daintily played speedy ornaments. It's kind of a signature of his style. He likes to do these little like appoggiatura or turnaround things, very light and quick when he solos, and he adds them to the melody here. So these light and speedy figures seem to be a marker of his style. After that melody, he gets into another kind of repeating progression of chords that create more tension. These have a little bit more dissonance, and he expands his improvisation over that. He goes on exploring for a while, which he ties back into the melody. There's a pause of the rhythmic motion. Then he works some longer sustained notes and chords into there. He picks up the motion again for a final melody segment to the end. It's quite long, but I thought it was enchanting and creative, and he has a lot of enthusiasm here. So he obviously loves this melody, so he's also worked in some original sort of diversions into it.
Another thing about him is that he seems to have a good sense of form, whereas he's not like playing, say, like 16 bars of chords. Like he'll kind of shape the piece in one thing, and then he'll have a contrasting section.
Right.
And he'll come back at the end. So he seems to like this ternary form that's used a lot in classical music. I noticed that in all 3 of these pieces so far, actually.
Right. And and so he's conscious of always returning to the theme in some form before he takes it into a different section. So it's very accessible.
Hey, by the way, do you think he combines a lot of things, and this had me thinking this. It put me in this weird state of mind where I was thinking, the song "Blue Moon," right? Blue Moon.
Yeah, sure.
I wonder if he could combine Blue Moon and Moon River, and call it Blue Moon River.
That's a good idea.
We should try it one day.
Yeah. First, I'll see if anyone's done it.
Blue Moon River.
That's a good idea, actually. Actually, someone once sent me a clip of all songs about the moon, and it was like a Name That Tune game. I think there was like 30 songs in there or something. There's a lot of songs about the moon.
And you lost an entire decade of your life listening to them all, right?
I knew most of them. Track 4, Friends.
It would take about 10 years to listen to them all, I think.
Track 4 is Friends But Brothers. And we have a guest Belgian trumpeter, Jean-Paul Estevenard. Excuse me. On trumpet. It begins with a one-note bass line joined by piano with shifting chords that keep the pulse. The trumpet joins in unison on a melody with the piano, and Herdy works up a Latiny kind of beat here. Riahi has some nice fills between the lines. He takes a short solo line before trumpet has a leisurely solo over the ever-pulsing bass. And rather than going on longer solos, the piano and trumpet continue to trade solos again and again, getting more intense as they do because the drums bring up the heaviness in the beat, and they finally work back to the melody for a final go around. So this one has this kind of constant pulse to it that carries it through, and it's nice to have a little breakup of the trio with the trumpet on this one. Now, track 5, we're going to go back to Moon River, and this is the trio version. Has just a short intro before getting into the melody. It's a nice rubato of just piano and bass to start. The drums join in, but the beat stays floating. And there's some reason why this feels a little unusual. So the first time I listened to it, I was, I think I was having a whiskey or something at night and just listening, not analyzing. I said, well, this is something different. I'm going to listen to it again. So if you listen to this carefully, the original tune is in 3/4. Right, but what they've done is
That's funny. I was wondering about this myself because I was like, it kind of sounds like 3, but there's kind of 4 or something. I don't know. What do they do?
Stretched this out and transformed it into a 5-beat.
Oh, I see.
Per measure, which completely changes the feel of the tune.
I was having trouble counting it, actually.
It's hard. It's because it's still kind of rubato and flowing, but there's actually 5 beats here. Well, we talked about a tune last week. What was it? It was that Burt Bacharach tune. What the World Needs Now.
No,
right? It has that kind of hokey. 4/4. It's normally 3/4 with that hokey da 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 da. That 70s kind of thing.
That was the one when you insulted Dionne Warwick, right?
Did I do that? No, I just.
I don't know. If
I think I praised.
I think I'm being a bit.
I thought I was praising Aretha Franklin, but
you did praise Aretha Franklin. Okay. I remember that.
Anyway, that was stretched out into 4/4, which changed the tune, and here we're getting something stretched even more than that. But it's kind of a really cool effect, and especially because we just heard it in that solo exposition. Here there's a nice gentle bass solo too that gets into some high tone register niceties. They get back to the melody that swells in volume, but it stays free flowing and softens to the end. So I thought it's kind of a creative take, especially messing with the meter of this song. And it's when you have a tune that everybody knows, well, you're going to get unexpected results in a good way here. Track 6, Hymn to Fazeni. And here we've got the Tunisian oud player, Akram Ben Romden, who I think is mainly a violinist, but sounds awesome on oud here. And it starts out with the oud on its own, and then it shifts to the trio, which develops kind of a 6-beat theme with a pulsing bass beat. And then the piano and oud play the melody in unison. Listen closely because the oud doesn't have a big tone, so when the whole trio is playing, but you'll hear that it's working together with the piano. Then the piano and oud again trade solo phrases for a while, building up intensity as they go. There's a percussion solo breakdown with some extra hand drums thrown in the mix here too, along with the drum kit. The rest comes down back in intensely after the percussion solo section, but they bring it down soft, go through the unison melody again, ending with repeated chasing phrases on oud and piano. It's a really nice Tunisian touch for this tune, I thought. Yeah. Some modal stuff happening. And,
good sound.
Nice
Reminded
melodies.
me a little of Anwar Ibrahim.
Yeah. Next one, Improbable. Pretty and sparse piano solo piece here. Riahi keeps it rubato with occasional peppered ornaments. This one shows off his sense of touch. Nice attention to dynamics. Sometimes the chords get more lush and an intensity builds up, but then he pulls it back. It's like he never lets himself get too overly expressive. But I thought it was very lovely and restrained playing. Track 8, Piano in the House. This one's interesting. I cheated on this because he's doing something interesting at the beginning. You can find the video on YouTube. He starts with some short staccato figures, which the tone changes over, and I figure he's doing something with the piano. So what he's actually
he had his hand in the piano.
Yeah, he's putting his hand on his left hand's on the strings, getting a special muted effect. This develops into a kind of hypnotic modal groove that the bass joins in. There's a contrasting section after that moves through some progressions in a more legato way. Riahi shows some rapid fire figures and expanded harmonic ideas outside of the mode in his improvisations. Midway through, the drums have some free fills and the tempo drops away. Things slowly build again. There's an unexpected little pause, but then a heavier groove takes shape over driving bass and drums. Then Riahi lets loose on some more ideas in his solo. They reset once more, softer to build up the theme to the end. It's a very rhythmic and intense piece, kind of cool in its construction. And then we end with the title track, Mhamdeya. This begins with a dreamy and slow intro over drum fills. A melody forms slowly through time on this one. Riahi finds some bluesy ideas and other intense swells in his playing. The trio really breathes as one. It shows a nice synchronicity that they're able to sort of breathe with this music. It's really like a swelling breath. There's some vocalization section. I don't have the album notes, but I'm assuming this is Riahi himself doing that.
I kind of figured it's his album. Must be him, right?
And then there's a nice bass solo. Riahi has some more piano time with dancing phrases, and the drums expand behind his playing. It quiets again for a final vocalization section to the end. It's a very unique effect with this sort of almost mystical kind of vocal added on top of it. So I enjoyed this recording a lot. I think Riahi has included some nice Tunisian touches. He shows some interesting character in his style with these really quick and light ornaments that he likes to add. There's a lot of variety in the material. The trio here plays really well in sync with each other. They're listening very carefully, adapting to each other, and they can sort of swell tempos, rubato. They can move through these different kinds of sections that change a lot on the first two tunes especially. I really recommend this. It's an exciting listen, and I think he's a young pianist to watch out for in the future.
Yeah, it'll probably only get better as albums go on, but there's nothing wrong with this. He has a real French feel for harmony and tone color and touch, and I really liked that. I'm always listening. That's one of my favorite things in music, what the French have done with touch and tone color and things like that. And whenever I hear it, I'm just always entranced. Lots of ideas and some really lovely ones too. I like this a lot. That was really good.
This is a good pick.
Yeah, this is my favorite jazz record of the week that you picked. So that was the one I liked the most.
Now the next one,
and it almost didn't make the cut, did it?
Well, actually, we had another fabulous recording that turned out to have been a re-release. It wasn't widely available when it came out in 2014, and it jumped labels. And then I thought it was new, but it wasn't.
Well, you may as well tell them what it was. Do you remember?
Oh, I don't remember the exact title now. So
because we didn't do it.
I'll include it again. Yeah. Okay. But anyway, with the way things are now, some things come out on small labels and then they never make it to streaming. And this was one of those. And then I think he probably he changed labels and they picked up this older release and then it was on there. And then it was, looked as if it was brand new and it actually wasn't. So I sort of stuck with our rule.
I'm frantically trying to come up with it now while you're talking.
Yeah, well, now that we mentioned it, we can let the readers know. It's
Bayati by Shahin Novrasli.
Yeah.
Novrasil, I can't see this. God.
Yeah.
Novrasli.
Yeah, you definitely want to check that out, too. There's a pianist with some really awesome technique. I forget, I don't know if I have the album label details here. No. Yeah.
Album label. It doesn't say on Deezer here. I'm kind of surprised. Oh, 8 Islands Records.
Yeah, 8 Islands Records. That's the new label. Yeah. Beati, check it out. Some awesome piano technique you're going to hear on that. But it was recorded in 2014. So anyway, the second album here, I think you're not so keen on. But
I was talking about this earlier in the week. Yeah.
Anyway, this is going to cross over to Scotland for Fergus McCready's new release on Edition Records, Forest Floor. Now,
I got to tell you right away, the title put me off.
Oh, okay.
Just because it's like, we're going to go into the woods now.
Yeah.
If it was about the beach, I would have liked it, I think.
Yeah. We had the woods, hence our hiking discussion last week.
I have this thing about hiking. I don't like hiking. I don't know.
And I don't think you like kind of themed jazz things. Sweets.
Well, it depends. I don't like sweets, but it depends. I don't know.
Right. Anyway, McCready.
There's something else about this I'll get into it. It's good. I don't want to the performances are all fantastic, but it's just something about it that that kind of rubs me personally the wrong way. I'll get into it when we get there.
Anyway, McCready got a lot of attention last year with his release Cairn, January 2021. It caught some attention internationally and coming out of the kind of expanding UK jazz scene now. And so
I think it made some of the year-end lists too, like Presto's or the other one, the other British magazine. I can't remember the name. I'm really in bad shape today.
And they tend to focus, on UK releases. And I remember reading about it, but I hadn't heard the other ones.
Jazz-wise, that's it.
Jazz-wise. So, okay, I'll check this out. Now, Forest Floor. So this is supposedly working on similar kind of characteristics of the previous release, emphasizing, and this is what kind of drew me to it, the Scottish folk influences that remain central to the trio's sound. So I thought, okay, that's going to go along with this theme really well. And so I thought I'd check it out. And so we've got the McCready's trio here with him on piano, David Bowden on bass, and Stephen Henderson on drums, and starts out with a tune. This was going to really hammer you from the beginning.
It did.
Yeah, Law Hill. There's a drum lead into a fast tempo of chiming modal chords. McCready starts it out with rhythmic playing along with the modal melody, but he brings it down soft a bit before repeating the melody and launching into a huge exposition on that. He rips into rapid figures and runs.
I say soft. Where is this soft?
Well, just for a second. There's a little inhale.
I must have blinked at that point.
It's a little inhale before he goes into this rapid figures and runs over the really busy drumming of Henderson. The piano is panned. This is the other strange thing about this release. It's piano is panned strongly with the high notes in the left channel and the low notes in the right. So you get this giant keyboard effect. This tune explodes with energy. It comes down again, and the drums and bass drop out for a bit, bass and piano, left hand establish an kind of inventive bass line that cycles around, giving Henderson some more drum expression time. And then Macready builds over the line with chords and swirling lines as they charge to the end. This is full-on explosive opening tune.
Yeah, I want to mention the whole sound of the ensemble. This is going to be true for the whole album, but I noticed this right away. Like the piano at the opening, like he's playing whatever his range is. It's like he's taking up every millimeter of the frequency spectrum that he's playing in. There's like there's no kind of, you can't hear through to the back. You know what I mean? Because it's almost like he puts up this piano curtain or wall that you just can't. You can't see. There are no chinks in it. You just can't hear through to the back.
Yeah, it's a big wall of sound for sure.
It's kind of like AC/DC on the piano. It just takes up everything.
Yeah, it's pretty full.
And he has a lot of interesting ideas, I heard, but I feel like he was just trying to cram them all into the same solo. And at the end, I was kind of like, just feel I was exhausted after this first track, to be honest.
There's no restraint at all in the first one. It's a full explosion. Yeah.
Okay.
I think,
there you go.
Yeah, there's some different things coming up here. The second track, The Unfurled Field. This one has a folk melody quality that moves along in a steady 4-beat. Bowden's bass line gives it motion with light drumming from Henderson, and Macready works around the melody, adding nice ornaments. Bowden takes a happy-sounding melodic bass solo here, and Macready starts his solo softly and spaciously. He's getting some sustain on repeated folky figures, adding answering lower lines in the left hand. Henderson works up the intensity underneath on the snare drum, as Macready creates a chiming wall of sound working into some cascading runs. There's a little break for the bass to carry the melody, and then Macready gets some more improv time, overdriving rockish beat from Henderson. Then it gets soft for a bit and returns to the original feel for a final run through the melody and slow down for the end. So you'll really pick up the folkish quality to some of the material in this tune. Track 3, Morning Moon. This one is kind of unique. It's got some repeating piano arpeggios and light chiming notes that make an intro into the kind of pretty pentatonic melody here. Macready shows off his most delicate kind of touch on this one. Bowden adds some matching sensitive bass lines and some string rubbing effects. Very light drum textures from Henderson here. It becomes kind of trance-like. Macready gets into some dreamy figures, runs, and trills, and it comes back down for another simply stated run through the melody, getting lighter and softer as it goes.
Yeah. It was atmospheric, I thought.
Yeah,
this one.
atmospheric. Yeah. Track 4, this is another pretty intense one, Landslide. It's got a drum intro that works into a beat. Macready enters with a busy ostinato left hand in 9/8 and then builds a melody over that. The bass has a simpler matching line, so it goes along with the piano, but it's not into 9 separate notes. It modulates and then returns, but the left hand keeps going in perpetual motion right to the end of this song. Macready improvises with contrasting rhythmic figures, tension-building harmonic ideas, fast runs, pulsing chords. It comes down in volume while the ostinato still goes on until the final note. Goes on forever.
I actually mentioned Philip Glass in my notes here because it did kind of remind me. It didn't sound like Philip Glass, but it's the same kind of like generation of material that Philip Glass uses. So
right.
It's more thickly scored than Philip Glass, of course, because
All right, track 5 is the title track, Forest Floor. This one's got some freely rolling low piano tones that make a base for Macready to introduce a rubato low melody. Bowden adds some soft bass. It pauses to move with the bass and then builds again with more rolling piano and cymbal washes. Macready swells the melody, before taking it down once more and then working in step with the bass. And then Macready ends it softly over a final cymbal and bass tone. I guess he's working on this image of like the forest floor as this kind of expanse of space to work in.
Yeah, I should mention too, this guy's got like a monstrous technique, though.
Yeah,
I mean, because he's constantly playing at full volume, and he'll often be playing rhythm against rhythm. It's pretty incredible, but I'm just kind of like,
it's a lot.
Stop. Yeah.
Next one, The Ridge, track 6, soft piano opening with openly voiced chords. Bowden plays the folk-sounding melody on bass with clear, tight articulation. It's in 6-beat phrases. Then Macready takes a turn with the melody. It's a longing minor kind of theme that shifts to major and then back again. Bowden returns with an improvised solo, digging into clear attacks. Macready then builds up the production with the sustained arpeggios, runs, and repeated figures, getting into some intense triplet ideas and then chiming out the melody once more. It gets quiet again. It seems as if it's over halfway through the piece, but then Macready keeps it going with a steady beat of chords. The chords develop some kind of syncopation inside them with one of the notes. Then a new rhythmic feel develops with a rising 3-beat ostinato bass line and then Henderson's subdivisions. Macready solos over the top with running lines and figures as the beat gets heavier. He chimes out syncopated chords for a bit before it quiets down over the continuing bass line, chiming out some sparse notes, and the bass line loses its first note and comes to a halt. So it's dun 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 dun, like that kind of thing, so it just breaks up a little bit as it goes on. Track 7, then Whitewater. This one begins with a rubato bass intro, some cymbal washes. Macready pops in with the drums with a melody and rhythmic accompaniment in a 5-beat pattern. Macready plays some rhythm feeling lines, and things are broken up by some cool bass and left-hand piano lines. Bowden has a tight bass rhythmic solo, and Macready has a solo where the harmonies and rhythms bleed into each other, working into a frenzy with some pretty impressive triplet runs. It settles back down before some more cool bass runs and then takes off on something new with Macready pounding out a repeating low chord figure and then going crazy with his right hand above it. Henderson feeds the frenzy with intense drumming, and it ends with a unison triplet line that sounds like something from a Rush song in the 1980s.
Yeah. 1980. It's funny you should say 1980s, because do you remember the new age music of the 1980s, like George Winston and stuff like that?
Yeah.
It was really gentle, but the kind of there was this kind of like the harmony. There wasn't really much harmony in that music, and I kind of had that feeling from this record too. There's good melody, and all that, but his harmony is kind of like monochromatic, and I actually mentioned that in Whitewater. I don't know. I feel like I've been hearing the same kind of harmony throughout the album. Like it's very much triads and that sort of thing. There aren't a lot of color chords and stuff. You know how much I like the French.
Yeah.
Kind of like color tones and such, and we don't get that here. This is really something different.
Yeah, it's rhythmic and kind of.
It's very rhythmic. Yeah,
rhythmic focused.
It's energetic. It's kind of like Jesus, like a it's like a tornado.
Yeah.
It's like a new age tornado.
I like this. It's interesting, but
it's like, not for me. I don't want to put him down because I think he's a great player, but it's not for me.
I can see why it catches the attention. Well, actually, there's two things you can catch attention with audience with, but the biggest one is rhythm. Yeah. Right? So
that did catch my ear, I have to say.
It does catch your ear.
Some pretty monstrous, like, rhythm against rhythm things in some of his solos.
So I can see why it gets a lot of buzz. And then we end up with Glade, track 8. This is a gentle waltzing piano melody. Left-hand accompaniment creates a peaceful mood, slightly impressionistic. in the chord voicings. The bass joins lightly on some beats with a sprinkling of cymbals. Macready improvises gently around the melody, and it starts to swell with more rapid figures and runs, but then it comes down in volume and simplifies. It slows once, picks up again before final ending. So, yeah, it's an interesting, often very intense recording. There's a lot of Scottish folk influences in the melodies. The focus here is on rhythm and interplay with those rhythms rather than, as Mike said, sort of harmonic explorations and things. So it does have some appeal with the energy that it produces. I can see why it's popular. Macready has an awesome...
His energy,
piano technique. And the kind of appeal in the kind of program that I put together tonight is that the infusion of these kind of Scottish folk melodies has some appeal as a launching point for improvisations. But
yeah, I felt, aside from like what I said, like all the, the listening, the sound field is like opaque. Like you can't hear through to the back.
It's very dense.
Not transparent. It's very densely packed. And he plays really loudly, almost ridiculously loudly for most of the recording. And I just feel like his playing is like lacking in subtlety. And I think that's what I go to jazz for. I like to hear subtlety.
This is the kind of antithesis of one of our favorite albums of last year. What was it?
I was thinking of this. Yeah. I was like, this is the opposite of, and I can't.
I'm trying to think.
It wasn't. Oh, is it Bill Charlap?
Yeah. Bill Charlap's.
Okay. Street of Dreams.
Street of Dreams, which is like so understated,
that was spacious, and it's unusual for him, in fact.
Yeah, and there's so much space to get into the notes. You almost lose track of what the tempos are and things because he's just creating this kind of space where time stands still, and this is the complete antithesis of
this really is
that.
The evil twin.
Yeah.
Well, it's the opposite. It's kind of like if they ever met, the world would end.
The bizarro
world.
Piano world. Yeah. All right. So anyway, we get some Scottish influences there, and the final stop on the ethnic piano train tonight is Dominica and Republic.
Oh, cool.
Let's see. So we're going to have some pronunciation things
this is all
here
like
with
kind of
Spanish-like,
I guess.
So I guess we're going to say J's are H's. Jose Jacobo.
Jacobo, yeah.
Yeah, with Herencia Criolla, which would mean Creole heritage. And so here we've got his new recording celebrating the kind of influences of African rhythms as coming through the Dominican Republic. And this is a very interesting recording, I thought. So he's kind of exploring these rhythms of the Dominican Republic, merengue de palo achao, bachata, gaga, and different kind of traditional Dominican rhythms with a modern jazz sound. And so you're going to get a real Dominican character here, a strong focus on rhythm in this album with various rhythms. But Jacobo is an awesome pianist with amazing technique and good harmonic development too. So this recording really goes in a lot of different directions. So I've got Jacobo on piano, Otoniel Nicholas on drums, Darol Mendez on bass here. And so we'll start out with the title track. Now, also on these tracks, a little bit strange thing about this album. Well, I want to say it's strange. It's going to be a little bit hard to figure out what's going on. There's I guess the notes call it an anthropological presentation. There's a short field recordings of it's usually music, but sometimes it's just like a snippet, even with music in the background at the beginning of the tracks that show the listener the cultural inspiration behind the composition and arrangement. But there's often not much to grab on there. So some of them are only 2 or 3 seconds. So you might not be able to gain much from that. Anyway, the first track is the title track, Herencia Criolla, original tune. The snippet here is a little bit longer. It's almost 20 seconds long. It's drumming and female vocals from a field recording, kind of lo-fi quality to it that contrasts once the music starts.
It's contrast in a big way because this record is, or at least these tracks, I think it gets a little better as it goes, or my ear adjusted, but it's very slickly recorded.
And good production.
Well, I think it was a little too much, but anyway, I'll get into that in a minute. Let's hear you first.
Anyway, as the field recording ends, Jacobo starts out this solo on piano with fast left-hand triplet patterns and a melody line added high on the piano.
Bass and glass-like, I thought.
Bass and drum join in. It's in 4 beats, but it's got like a 12/8 feel with the triplets. But there's lots of complex rhythmic interaction going on in the trio. Jacobo stops with the triplet backing and opens it up for a deep and woody bass solo from Mendes. Nicholas has nice tight drum clicking in the back, keeping everything tidy. Jacobo comes back for a piano solo. Without the triplets, it's more free-flowing and rhythmically presented, and Mendes keeps complex bass patterns underneath. It's an intense piano solo, accented attacks and runs. Jacobo brings the triplets back once more and then hammers out chords above before finishing off with both hands joining the triplet pattern. So all of these songs, I've got exhausted myself trying to figure out what's going on because there's so many things to describe. You can just say a constant rhythmic interplay is the hallmark of what's going on here.
Yeah. The thing I didn't like though is the recording is very, very slick, like I said, because I feel like it takes away, and this might be my punk rock background talking here. I think it feel like it takes away some of the humanness of the performance. Like you can't really hear the musicians' tones or things like that because it's in this production soup sort of. Although as the recording goes on, either I adjust to it or it changes. I'm not really sure. I think it gets a little better as it goes.
Okay. The next track is a traditional tune arranged by Jacobo into a jazz kind of setting, San Miguel. So it's a folk tradition, Catholic saint story here with African rhythms. And then we get the jazz harmony and interplay of the ensemble here. This one begins with a short 5-second field recording. It's kind of percussion and male voice. Then the piano introduces the very joyful melody on this one with drum hits. Jacobo plays kind of dancing melodic lines above a triplet figure bass and his own left-hand figure that has a 2-beat and 1-beat kind of pattern. So you've got the triplet bass da 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 da, but the piano's da 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 da, so that pushes it along. But the beat is subdivided into 3. There's a 2-hand synchronized run that ends in a very ominous sounding chord, very contrasting to the happy melody. And then it's back to the happy melody again that ends on a sudden chord that begins a new section. The building ostinato bass line to a repeat of the previous 2-hand line and the ominous chord again. Then it slows down into a free space for Jacobo to start some relaxed soloing over nice cymbal textures and bass. A faster tempo forms through the cymbals and the pulsing bass line, pushing Jacobo to a flowing solo of runs and accented chords. They come back to the theme and the ostinato bass part again, ending on that ominous chord. This one's really exciting with interesting contrasting parts. So I enjoyed this one a lot.
Yeah, I noted the complex rhythmic patterns, and again, it starts out, for me, overproduced, but at the end, the tempo suddenly like picks up really at the end, and the piano starts soloing seriously, and it's really good. There's humanity and breathing in the lines the piano plays, so now I'm starting to kind of get into it a little here. I do like the music. I like what what they're playing.
Yeah.
But, anyway, the next piece I liked a lot, actually.
Oh, you like this one?
This one really picked me up.
So track 3 is called Dolores. Just a few seconds of recording at the beginning here. It's like a bell and some distant, like, chanting vocals. Hard to make much out of what's going on. Then
and the piano chords chime kind of like to lead, as though that kind of, it was passed down over, like, the whatever generations into this current piano. It was really nice, I thought.
So from that field recording, you get a gentle melody that comes in on the piano. It gets echoed in the bass. It's kind of like a question-answer thing. Then the piano and bass work together on a new melody section. Cymbals punctuate some phrases. A new rhythmic feeling develops with the full entrance of the drums. It's like a waltzing 12/8 feeling, but there's some pauses.
12/8, huh?
Yeah, pauses after some phrases that break it up. I say 12/8 just because there's kind of that's the pattern. There's at least 4 beats in the pattern of the triplets that go through there.
Because I was hearing each chord with an accent, so I said 3/4. I don't know. I didn't hear that.
What I mean is, so if you listen to the 3 beats and the harmonic progression, there's 4 different arpeggios that come there. Okay. So I'm not sure what the meter is, but the grouping of the chords will be, there's 4 different ones before they go back. So then Jacobo works through the melody with little fills in the spaces. Mendes gets a very rhythmic bass solo here that has some unpredictable hesitations. They create a lot of rhythmic tension because they're sort of placed outside of the beat. Rather than locking into a groove, he creates tension by holding back and playing around with the rhythm. Jacobo gets a solo next. The way he times his phrases here over the loping bass rhythm, also using hesitation, is very intriguing. Playing around with this complex rhythmic thing, it's very complex, interesting. He works up to some high trills and chiming chords. The rhythm stops for a bit as Jacobo returns to the original melody sections, and then they fade out over return of the field recording from the beginning of the song. So complex rhythmic stuff going on here, for sure.
Yeah, and very pretty, too. Dolores must have loved this tune.
Yeah.
It's very pretty, almost like Vince Guaraldi has a bit of a look in here. I feel like it's got that kind of like waltzing sort of light quality to it. I like this one.
Yeah, very.
And I didn't feel like this was overproduced this time. See, that's the thing. Okay. I feel like the production is changing somehow.
It could be. Yeah. Track 4. Now this one is one of the busiest tracks on the album. Really hard to pin down all the things going on. It's called Dos Locos, and
the other loco is Miguel Zenon, right?
Yeah. Miguel Zenon on alto sax, who we've heard a number of times in different projects with the Chad Lefkowitz big band and some other Latin releases as a
I'm generally a fan of his.
Yeah. And the tune is by Alejandro Martinez. There's so much going on here. Zigzagging left hand. I use that word zigzagging because it's sort of this bass line that cuts across the rhythmic patterns, and working with the bass that dart about as Jacobo peppers chords above that in the intro. Then Zenon enters on the melody that's also heard in the right hand of the piano with like 2 notes. So it's kind of harmonized in the piano with the sax. There's a little transition section into the sax and piano right hand working across the zigzagging bass line that we heard before. Now, there's so much going on here, the drums actually drop out for a bit so you can get that sort of crosstown traffic working of these 2 different things going on. There's more zigging in the drums as the drums come back, and then it's into a solo for Zenon over this really complicated rhythmic sort of arterial traffic that's going on underneath it, and the syncopations of the bass. This is going to be hard to solo over, but Zenon holds it together really well. He gets some passionate, breathy, high register tone things going on, and he ends it up with a kind of bluesy flourish at the end. So it's a very intense bass to blow some improvisation over, but he does a good job with it.
I just want to say about the piano solo was a really well built solo, but I felt like Zenon's solo was a bit distant in the mix because there's all this complicated stuff going on, and he feels like he's a little back. And
I agree with you there. He sounds too small in this recording.
Yeah, because he'll make some really kind of like ugly, rough sounds to really, kind of affect you, and they don't really. He does that here, but they don't really impact. They don't register as rawly as they normally do when he's up front. So I was kind of a little bummed out about that.
I agree. It doesn't actually sound like the same character as he does on other recordings I've heard him on. He's not
he's got a big
enough
presence generally, you know, especially on his own solo recordings.
Yeah, after he finishes solos, Jacobo gets one of his own here. He goes through some blazing runs, rhythmic figures. It's quite an impressive piano solo on this one.
Yeah, I like this one.
It works back into that zigzag again with the piano and sax melody, where Zenon is working with the piano again. They groove out over a chord vamp at the end of that this time. It gives Zenon some more blowing time, and they have fun working up the funkiness of that kind of rhythm as they go. This is all held together by very sharp and tidy drum work by Nicholas, I should say. If you listen to the tight hi-hat work and snare things that he does throughout the album, it's kind of essential for changing up the feels that are constantly flowing on this recording. Next we've got track 5, Bachata Rosa. Here we've got Ramon Vasquez on bass as a guest on this tune. Juan Luis Guerra is the composer.
And I want to note that the bass has a really good sound on this particular track. He's well recorded. It's prominent on here. A 2-second recording clip starts this one out of field music into high repeated notes on the bass. Jacobo brings in a sunny melody that has some breakups of the rhythm before steady groove is established over tight cymbal work from Nicholas. There's a repeated syncopated chord transition into a Mendez bass solo. Or actually, this is not Mendez here, this is Vasquez. It's rhythmic with lots of space between the phrases, some containing some impressive, speedy, repeated notes on the bass, really working up some technique here. Jacobo rings out some accented chords on top and then gets an impressive solo with flowing lines that skillfully accented rhythmic figures come out of over the bass and drum groove. And then they give us another round of the pretty melody to close it out. Track 6, Caña Brava, composer is Tonio Abreu. This one has another very short 2-second clip at the beginning. Yeah, they're almost disappearing. I think the track after this doesn't even have a field recording, and then they bring it back at the end.
Yeah.
So they're slowly disappearing.
Yeah. Jacobo starts out with some rubato, but rhythmic chords with a top note melody on top of the chord, so you can kind of pick out the melody that's coming through. The bass joins in and then drums, and then a really cool syncopated groove is set. There's some fun interplay between higher piano melody lines and bass and left-hand lines. It's hard to really keep track of the meter here. Sometimes the lines seem to be in a 6-beat pattern, but it changes up. The rhythm breaks up, and Jacobo has a solo that's kind of free-feeling until another new groove settles, but it constantly evolves along with his rhythmic ideas, which get very intense here. It seems to take on another 12/8 kind of groove in the piano chords. The bass forms under that, and Nicholas gets some drum play there too. They work the groove hard, as the drums return to a steady beat, with Jacobo hammering these rhythmic chords. Once again, the groove changes up, but it keeps this 12-beat kind of idea until a final play of the earlier syncopated groove ends it. So constant rhythmic change is the name of the tune here. Very interesting.
See, but to me too, the production is changing at about this point, or from track 5, it kind of it sounds a little less processed, and I'm liking it more at this point. So this album really grew on me. I'll talk about it at the end.
Track 7, Batte. This one, we get some extra percussion added here from Magic Mejia and Felix Garcia on percussion. I wonder if
his mom called him Magic.
I don't know, yeah. Hey, Magic.
Imagine that.
Interesting, anyway. There's another snippet of an intro recording. I think, and we're going to hear this later, I think this must be a type of a friction drum. Like, we hear in Brazilian music, what do they call it? Cuica? That, the stick through the drum that gets that kind of pitch. You can change the pitch. I
don't know what it's called. But I do know the sound.
Different cultures around the world have these kind of drums, and that's what it sounds like here to me. But it's a kind of a deeper toned instrument. Anyway, the tune itself starts out with bass alone in a groove pattern. Piano and then drums join in on it. They play around with the theme. First it gets a heavy straight groove, and then Jacobo syncopates it over Nicholas's tight hi-hat. Then we get a percussion interlude with that kind of drum pitches thing here. I think it's a friction drum kind of thing. Jacobo is up for a solo next over a really driving bass groove. Dizzying runs, syncopated chords, rolling high figures, and pounding out intense left hand. It's a really intense piano solo here. It modulates for a bit and settles back. It does that again as he comes out of it. Kind of a lift and a setback. A high, tight bass pattern comes in then and sets a groove for some tight drum soloing, emphasizing the snare work, and they ended up with a short syncopated exposition of the melody here. So we get some extra percussion to the mix. We come to track 8, Quisqueya is the name of the tune.
The vocal field recording is back.
Yeah, Felix Garcia on percussion. It's a tune by Rafael Hernandez. The vocal recording starts this one. Then Jacobo and Mendez started out with a repeating 8-note left-hand piano and bass line with some chords on top. Percussion sounds like congas, and then some other stick work percussion instruments are added on top of that. There are a couple pauses in the groove into a melodic section on bass by Mendez. Jacobo takes over with a solo over this really complex groove. There's so much going on here. He keeps it very melodic in the solo, though, but he does amazing things working with the rhythm. They repeat the 8-beat bass pattern section and then the bass melody again as well. And then it gets into a groove out over the funky bass patterns and Jacobo's high register syncopated chords that fade out in the mix as the bass plays on prominently for a while, and then the bass stops and it ends with some final percussion that just sort of comes to an end there. And that's it. So I thought it's a very exciting recording, making contemporary jazz infused with traditional Dominican type rhythms. There's so much going on rhythmically all the time. It's kind of dizzying in a way, but Jacobo seems to be able to surf these kind of rhythmic changes and use them to drive his inspiration in his soloing. So you have to be really familiar with all these grooves and his native sort of ethnic rhythms to be able to, create ideas over that, I think. I think his solos are inspired and infectious, but sometimes the busyness of all the grooves wears me out a little bit because they're constantly changing. Nevertheless, I found it kind of exciting and a fun listen.
Yeah, I like that quality, the changing rhythms. That excites me. And tiring it may be, but still, I find it like it gives me like a real a bit of a thrill. This album really grew on me as it went on, because I think after track 5 on, the production changed. It kind of got a little less sort of thick with the studio sound, and it got more human as a result. So the first tracks, although I liked track 3 a lot, Dolores, I think that came across really, really well. The first 2 tracks, I was like, oh man, is the production going to be all like this? If it was, I probably wouldn't have liked this a lot.
That's interesting. I'm going to have to listen to it again.
I think it was probably recorded at different times, I wonder,
That's possible,
or they just changed things.
Yeah,
because I've heard records do that before.
Sure.
Yeah, it sounded less processed in the second half of the album, and the bass sounded more alive, especially from track 5 on. So, yeah, I liked this album. I certainly liked all of the music and all of the playing. Just a little bit, uneven production. That's my only problem. I want to recommend, if any of the band members are listening, just keep a light hand on the production there, in the studio. Or record yourselves live. I think this will sound great.
Yeah, it's very exciting, and it seems like Jacobo gets, like I said, when things get complicated, he gets more inventive. Even, and he really he pulls out all these rhythmic nuances, but then you can really rip through some interesting harmonic kind of ideas too over a very complicated shifting rhythmic bass too. So I found it really interesting. I'll check out what he's doing next.
Let's keep an ear on him and see what he comes up with next.
Yeah. What do we got for next week? Any hints?
I don't know. I haven't decided yet.
Okay.
I don't want to say because I might not choose the things I was talking to you about before. So.
All right. But if you'd like to know, listeners...
It'll be great, though, I can tell you that.
Yeah, of course. Not long after this episode gets released, I'll definitely have the playlist up because we decide right away, so you can check that out on Deezer or on our Facebook page if you want to see the music for next week and get a jump on listening. We'll get that all worked out.
You put it on the Facebook page now?
Yeah, I put it on the Facebook page to get our posts up, too, so you can check it out there as well.
Write some comments on Facebook, listeners.
Yeah. So there you have it, episode 59 of Adult Music, the podcast with music for the mature mind. So please do like and subscribe on whatever platform you're on. Send us a message, comments, Adult Music Podcast, all one word, at gmail.com. Thanks again, as always, to Fast Signs of Staten Island for our new logo, eye-catching neon on that brick wall that hints of seedy things, not to be found in our podcast because it's all about serious music here. And we thank you for listening, and we'll see you again next week for episode 60.